Now we should, in theory, be streaming. Let's see. I'm not getting any dropped frames yet, Daniel, so I think we're streaming. Just, you know, I give up at this point. All right, so hello, everybody. Welcome to WordCast number 54. We've got some huge news for you guys this week. Actually, a lot of stuff. I just saw the keys fly in front of the screen, yeah. On stream. They're, like, right in front of it. They covered the whole screen. So, anyway, we got some amazing news for you guys this week. Actually, it's massive. This is our, like, biggest document ever. A lot of it, we're going to have to rapid fire through it. We'll try and answer as many comments and questions as we can, but, of course, there's just a lot of stuff to cover. So yeah, WordCast number 54. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty big number. Feels good. Feels good. 54. I can count to 54.
I hope so.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, all right, everybody. So should we just jump into the what's first, or do you have something you want to mention before we start?
No, let's just go.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. So, AMD Vega rumors, Vega 20. So, we have Vega 10 out right now. There's rumors about Vega 20 coming out. This is via WCCF Tech. Take it with a grain of salt. These are rumors. I want to make sure that that is set in stone before talking about it too much.
Especially since WCCF Tech can't do a simple Google search before they post it.
Apparently not. Yeah, I don't know. I like their news generally, but it's just too, yeah, it's just, sometimes it's far out there, but sometimes they're right, you know, so, all right. So anyway, Vega 20 GPUs are rumored to be designed for AI. That name for Vega 20 came from leaked slides, so it's not confirmed that it'll be called that, but that also would make a lot of sense, because we have Vega 10 out right now. And it popped up in a Linux patch, which has been a reliable source of nomenclature for various products and stuff before. Just because Linux patches, they have to come out before the product's released so that everything's ready for it. And so you spot these changes. You can tell that probably means that product's actually coming to the market fairly soon. Now, it's supposed to be, Vega 20 is supposed to be built on the 7nm process node. I kind of find that hard to believe. I don't think that that's going to be it. I don't think it's going to be built on 7nm. I think it's going to be built on 12nm. Mm-hmm. I think that's what's going to happen, but we'll see. That's just my personal opinion. Yeah. There's also over 50 new hardware-level features for Vega in Linux. I don't know what they even really meant by that. So I'm just going to state that, but then be like, whatever. So anyway, now the rumors in terms of like performance and other stuff like this, and this was unrelated to the Linux patch. So the Linux patch kind of verifies that we've got some new kind of Vega GPU coming out at some point, and that's pretty solid and set in stone in my personal opinion. But the rumors in terms of the performance and other specifications of Vega 20 are looking to be 8 times the double precision performance, so that's pretty massive, versus, I believe it's versus Polaris. It's kind of weird. Let me check to make sure that's not versus regular Vega. I'll find out here. Hold on, because I am not entirely sure about that. All right. Let's see. Yeah, it's not... Okay, yeah, so I was talking about versus Vega 10. So I find that a little hard to believe, but not entirely. And then double the memory interface bandwidth, which we expect. That's just... We expect that with HBM, because there's 4 HBM2 stacks. So 32 gigabytes of HBM is going to be available on it, which is pretty insane. I do think that'll happen. And it's got a full terabyte per second of bandwidth. So that's pretty insane. Yeah, that's it. It's not really much.
Where's my petabyte?
I know, we need at least a petabyte. Also, what's up, Alien Technology? Nice to see you here. Sweet. We've got quite a few people watching right now.
Nice.
All right. So, do you have anything you want to say about Vega, or shall we continue?
Not yet. I'll be more interested once we have, like, confirmation on some of the stuff.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it seems like really good upgrades if it's there, but just really, really pushing it for I feel like they would make a couple steps towards these products, not just go straight
I think so
for it.
too. I think so too. I think it's that hitting something like that's going to be a pretty impressive mark.
Especially
if they do.
Since AMD generally likes to just rebrand their products.
That's true, and I've never actually been entirely against that. You know, I mean, hey, it's kind of what Intel's been doing and other companies have been doing in terms of, you know, using the same process node, and, you know, sure, they're refining the architecture, not in terms of the physical architecture.
Oh, I'm not talking about that part. I'm talking about when AMD just essentially comes out with a new generation on their top, like a
well, yeah, but there usually is a
and then
slight performance bump. It's not much. But it's mostly driver optimization. There have been multiple times
stuff where they've... Well, yeah, but driver optimization would happen.
Are going to happen anyway. Right.
You can't take that into account.
Sometimes they push the overclocks a little further, though, and stuff like that.
But
But
them more than anyone that I've noticed have done just straight rebrands.
That's true. That's true. I'll give you that. Yeah. So I guess we'll just have to see.
Yeah.
I want to see more Vega on the lower end for gaming graphics. That's what I'd look forward to because it's been so good. Once you underclock it and, clock it down to where it's really built to be at, it consumes a more modest amount of power and gives you a much better performance to power ratio. So, yeah, I'm excited for it. I still want to get my hands on a Vega 56 for my main machine, but got a lot of other things to do before then, including stuff like this.
Yeah.
So, in case you guys are wondering what this is, now that we actually have a few people in the stream, this is the 24-pin custom cable I've been working on for a friend of mine. Finally got it finished, and it doesn't work. So that's great, 40 hours of work put into it, kind of crazy. Now, I'm trying to figure out exactly what's going on with it. I'm thinking the pins are not aligned correctly or something. Maybe I messed up when I wrote my diagram of what wires went where. But anyway, it looked good. I'm very happy with the style of it. But yeah, in case you guys were wondering, that's what's going on here. So I'll probably make a video about that once I figure out what the heck's wrong with it, if anything. All the pins line up in terms of continuity, so I don't know exactly what's going on. Okay, so we got quite a bit more AMD news here, actually. So we've got the Ryzen 2700X live stream. So somebody live streamed performance for what they claim to be a Ryzen 2700X. Obviously, it's been removed from YouTube and pretty much all other sources, so you can't really find the original footage of it anymore, unfortunately. But the Cinebench R15 score was 1790 points versus the 1800X, which was at 1620 points. So a good 10%-ish performance improvement, which is fairly significant, especially because of 2700X. If they release a 2800X, that means this is technically the middle tier part.
Yeah.
Right? So that was comparing it to an 1800X, not a 1700X. So that's pretty cool. Hopefully we actually see that. We're hoping to see more room for overclocking. That's really the goal here, in my opinion. And then memory latency appears to be lowered to about 66 nanoseconds, so about another 10% drop in performance. I wrote drope for some reason, but drop in performance. So anyway, yeah, it's cool. It looks somewhat significant. I hope it happens. Now, pricing leaked as well, some pricing charts for Ryzen 2, and this one I'm actually pretty inclined to believe. It was also from WCCF Tech, but this one here was a leak from some listings in, I think it was Newegg's shopping cart. Yeah, it was Newegg's shopping cart, so it's probably legitimate. So we'll see, but it was a leak, not a rumor, so it's more likely to be confirmed. So the Ryzen 7 2700X is looked to be at $329, which is cheaper than initially expected by like $40.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. It'll come with the Wraith Prism cooler, which is a brand new rumored cooler that has RGB and a transparent fan on it. I think that's acceptable for a higher end product to just include that.
I really think that even if they're cheap, crappy ones, every processor should come with a CPU cooler.
Yes, I agree.
I dislike the whole X models not coming with one at all.
They don't. That's right.
Correct.
That's right. I'd forgotten about that. I think
so
everything should.
If you buy it and you have...
Sorry, my dog is being noisy upstairs. Oh, man. You know you're live right now, right?
It's funny. It's funny.
We need to just need to clear out the room when we're gonna live stream.
Oh my god.
That's just what we need to do.
That's
apparently.
not gonna stop your dog though. From down.
Oh boy.
Jeez.
We got a lot to get through, and this is already falling apart. I'm scared. Okay.
But yeah, I think that all of them should come with one because it's like, oh, my CPU cooler came in late. Now I can't build my computer. Oh, it had issues.
Yeah.
Or if you're just wanting to, build it on the test bench.
Even Threadripper should come with. No, I'm kidding. There's no cooler that's cheap that could come with it, but yeah.
But at least for consumer products.
Yeah, I agree. For anything below enthusiast level, there should be heat sinks, and I completely agree with that statement. But what I will give AMD credit for is the Wraith coolers have been consistently better than Intel's stock box cooler that they're complete trash. I mean, to the point the box cooler can't keep some of Intel's higher end parts that it comes with cool under load, right? It's just a horrible, because it's literally just a piece of copper with some aluminum around it, and you mount it on there. And so I can kind of understand it on a specific, on AMD's perspective, being like, we're going to make a much better one to include with all of the lower end parts, but the higher end parts, they expect people to know what they're getting into. I still agree. I'd like to see it on all of them. Intel you are the guys that need to either include a better cooler or stop including a cooler.
They should just include a better cooler.
They really should. I agree. Well, they've that's the funny thing is they've had better box coolers. They've shrunk the height of them down from about yay big to about yay big in terms of the heatsink without the fan.
Yeah.
They could just go back to the larger ones that aren't that much more expensive.
Or they could actually just spend the money and design a better one.
Right, yeah. Which is an option. But, I mean, even just... They probably still have all the tooling to make the larger one. Just freaking do it. It's not that, like, jeez. It's just frustrating to me. So, anyway... So, the rumors have the 2700X running at 4.35 gigahertz turbo... and I believe that's the single core turbo, but even a single core turbo that high gives me indication that I think a 4.3 to 4.4 gigahertz overclock across all cores will be widely possible on the Ryzen 2 series. I hope. We're hoping to see clock speed improvements. I don't expect to see massive ones. I think 200 to 400 megahertz is reasonable, right? You know, you could get some Ryzen parts to like 4.1 gigahertz, maybe 4.2 if you're really lucky. So I think it would be acceptable, you know, to see 4.4, maybe 4.5 gigahertz.
Yeah.
And that's starting to narrow that gap between them and Intel. And that's part of why Intel's been pushing so hard with their new Turbo Boost technology, you know, the 3.0 that pushes a single core, and then they have like the all core, and then they have like the 2-core boost. And the idea behind that is probably to compete, to try and keep that edge as much as possible over AMD at stock settings at least.
Even then, that just, I feel like every processor from every company should just have that, where it pushes however many cores are in use as far as they can.
Right, and even Intel doesn't still technically do that. You know, they choose 2, and then they have the all-core, which means it can just, here's everything. They don't have a variation in between.
Yeah, it should just simply scale.
I think it should too. I can understand some of the engineering issues with, or not issues, but challenges with that, but it's doable.
But if you've gotten to the point where you can do 2, you can do 3.
Yeah, right. But the cost does go up regarding that. Because of the way that the clock speeds are controlled individually, it also can put more strain on other components, right? And so, and they want to stay within a certain TDP. So I can kind of understand it, but I still agree that more dynamic scaling would make more sense. But point is here, I think we're going to see some better clock speeds on Ryzen 2, like substantially better overclocking, which is going to narrow that one spot that Intel is still winning in, which is overall single core, and in that case primarily gaming performance. You know, most applications that actually need really powerful CPUs aren't 1 or 2 core threaded, other than games. You know, applications yeah, right, exactly. Whereas applications like Premiere Pro and stuff like that, right, it's like you can see the improvements from a single core, but more cores is going to give you the bigger improvement overall. So I think that's going to help narrow that gap a little more, though, because, you know, there are still people that see, oh, well, the Ryzen chip's running 30 FPS slower than Intel, and it's like, okay, well, it's 220 versus 250. Is that big of a deal? Probably not, but it looks like a large margin to people, right? So then the Ryzen 7 2700 is rumored to be $299 with the Wraith Spire cooler. The Ryzen 5 2600X is rumored to be $229 with the Wraith Spire cooler. And the Ryzen 5 2600 is rumored to be $199 with the Wraith Stealth cooler, which is a slightly smaller one. So, we've also got some more AMD news here. This is fun. AMD EPYC is starting to look a little bit more epic. So, pretty happy about that. EPYC is a really great server platform overall. You get a lot of PCI Express lanes. It's a lot cheaper than what Intel has to offer. And in terms of server applications, the latency increase that you get from Infinity Fabric, especially Infinity Fabric between dies themselves, isn't as big of a deal because you tend to allocate certain cores to certain applications and certain virtual machines. Yeah. And then you also have the... You generally have all your RAM slots populated. On a server, it's pretty common to see all of them populated. And, you don't plan to upgrade your RAM later. It's like you pick the amount that you plan to use, and you just fill it up with that. So if you're going to do 64 gigs and you have, 8 DIMM slots, you do 8 gigabytes per, right? Yeah. That's just generally what I've seen in my experience in IT as well. So AMD EPYC, they won Yahoo Japan. Yes, Yahoo is still a pretty large company and still builds pretty massive servers. So they already have deals with Microsoft and Baidu, which we've actually mentioned before on the podcast. And there's also some new servers that have come out using EPYC from Dell, and that's what Yahoo Japan ended up purchasing. So they purchased, doesn't say how many, but they're going to be using at least Dell PowerEdge R6415s, which are the server running an EPYC 7551P, which is their highest end part. That's 32 cores, 64 threads with a 2 gigahertz base, a 2.55 gigahertz all-core boost, and a 3 gigahertz single-core boost. Single core boost isn't that big of a deal on server, especially something that's that high core count, but the all-core boost is pretty cool to see. Just amazing processor. It's really impressive what EPYC's been able to do in the server world, so I really like to see that. So Lisa Su was also, she's been predicting mid-single-digit server market share in 2018, which doesn't sound like much. You know, she's saying like 5-6%. Doesn't sound like much, but that's a huge jump over 0%. So now they're actually taking
that's
back
where the market was.
Oh, I know. It's so sad that AMD rounded literally to 0% of the market. And so if they can push to 5 or even 8%, woo, and it looks like they're on track.
When 5% market share is an achievement for an established long-term company.
That says something.
Yeah.
And you know, AMD's Opteron processors for servers weren't that bad.
That bad.
But part of it
you
was...
have to use the qualifier
well,
that bad.
no, part of it was that they didn't release things often enough.
Yeah.
That was the primary issue that I see. Yeah, and so I guess my statement now, though, is I like to see that companies are realizing that EPYC is cheaper and tends to be better for most server applications. Now, if you're doing a render farm or other stuff like that, you're probably still better off going with like Xeon stuff that's going to utilize all cores across one application. The Infinity Fabric does start to get in the way in some sense there, but this is amazing. This is impressive to me, and I really, really like seeing this. So.
Oh, wow.
Alien Technology said, yeah, Yahoo's really popular in Japan. Yes.
Yeah, and
indeed.
I looked it up. They're second place by quite a bit. Google's in the upper 60s. Yahoo's in the low 30s. And then the next closest is Bing at like 2.
Wow.
And that's updated as of like this year.
Interesting.
And they're all holding steady about that. There's not any like significant decline for Yahoo. That's just their consistent market share.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's different than I thought.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it doesn't completely surprise me, but it does a little bit, to be honest.
Whereas in the US, Yahoo's 4%.
Yeah.
Google's 87%.
That's a big deal then. Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. All right. So I guess we'll move on to some of the other big sets of news this week. We've got a whole bunch of Intel stuff lined up for you guys, so this will be fun. I'm also a little angry. Not much. Not that it really matters that much, but a little angry. So Intel released their new i9 series for laptops, as well as their new U series processors for laptops. And let me see what my notes are seeing here. Yeah. So most of it, I'll just... What's up?
Oh, I was just yawning.
Oh, so yeah, most of it... Okay, so Intel released the Core i9 and Core i7 6-core CPUs for mobile. So let me see if I can get the lineup opened here. Let's see here. So there's quite a few different SKUs, actually, that came out. So here we go. We got an image here. So there's the Core i9 8950HK, and that is the K series, so it's overclockable, high-performance mobile part. It's 6 cores at 2.9 gigahertz base clock and 4.8 gigahertz maximum single core frequency. I'm sure the listings are somewhere, but I don't see the all core boost here. But again, 6 cores, 12 threads, which is pretty massive in a 45 watt TDP, but also overclockable. So putting that in a laptop, pretty cool to see. Although at this point, we have already seen desktop processors be put in beefy gaming laptops, and most laptops that are going to be... The desktop processor is still quite a bit higher TDP, but oftentimes I think it makes more sense to go with the desktop processor.
Unless they can fit this into slimmer like workstation builds.
They can somewhat, yeah.
So
yeah, but I just feel like having the K part just doesn't make as much sense to me. Whereas you have the i7 8850H, which is 2.6 gigahertz base, 4.3 boost. So it's not as good in terms of clock speeds, but it's the same TDP, which means the all-core boost is probably very similar. And it's still a 6-core, 12-thread part. And so I just feel like in most cases, that makes more sense because it's a little bit cheaper. And overclocking in a laptop, generally, if they're planning to save cooling performance by going with this instead of a desktop processor, it doesn't make sense to have overclocking, because if the cooling capacity of the machine can handle the higher clock speeds that you can push the HK to, it can probably handle a stock clocked, like 8700K.
Yeah. Now, though, what if a company, for example, were to design a slimmer version of that, like, hybrid liquid-cooled, air-cooled laptop that you could dock, that type of thing?
Now, that would be a little bit more sensible,
yeah. More docking with external GPUs and things, so we might end up seeing long-term more
cooling capacity increases
in
terms of docking, and that's something I'd actually love to see. That's always been something that, I'm more of a desktop guy, but that's always been something that's been a dream of mine, so to speak, is have a somewhat thin and light gaming, nice laptop, and then you dock it at home, and you have a better cooling performance there, as well as it connects to all your peripherals. Like, I would love the idea of you just plug it in, it cranks your clock speeds up, it cranks your GPU clock speeds up as well, and it attaches you to any external storage you have and any external displays and peripherals you have. I think that would be a really cool setup for somebody that's on the road a lot, that also needs performance on the road.
Yeah.
Just that ability to get home from a day at work or school, and you just set it down, and all of a sudden it performs much more similarly to a desktop.
Yeah.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
And then even if you're a video editor or something, like I said, you have all your storage attached, your drives just connect.
Yeah.
That's ideal in my opinion.
The other reason, well, really the unlock part, I don't think, or obviously doesn't really matter for this, but like the main reason I feel like the Core i9 is going to get used over the Xeon is just in certain circumstances it is nice to have the built-in GPU.
Yes, it is. Yes, and I can understand that as well.
Especially for like gaming laptops where you can use that to do some of the encoding on for games and stuff.
Right. So. And there's also the yeah. So I get that. Okay, so there's, I guess I'll just continue with the lineup. Okay, so there's also a few other parts here in this new lineup. So there's the i7-8750H, which is a slightly lower clock 6-core 12-thread part. And again, they're the same TDP, so it's just a little bit of a cheaper part. Probably does actually run a little cooler, though. And then there's the i5-8400H, which is a 4-core 8-thread. Now, that's something that bothers me a little bit, is the nomenclature system that Intel's been using, because i5 has, for a long time, it's meant the not hyper-threaded parts, other than on the U series chip that changed. And now we're seeing a lot of like just mixture, and I can understand the like Intel's perspective on it of, you have i3, i5, i7, and i9, and they're adjusting the SKUs relative to the relative performance of their entire lineup. So, they come out with i9 for the higher end stuff, but now i5s are more powerful than they used to be, not just in terms of they're more powerful, but in terms of like they're actually substantially different products now.
Yeah.
But I can understand it because they're scaling that up, because their top end parts have scaled up to higher performance levels because they've added more cores. But it's still, I think, is confusing to people a little bit. Of course, Intel's never been known for not being confusing with their nomenclature, so that
being said, I think most of the people that this would be confusing enough to affect their purchasing decision for wouldn't really know much of what hyper-threading is to begin with.
That's probably true. That's a good thought.
You're just gonna know that the i5 is worse than the i7.
Right.
And that's still the case.
And that still is true. Yeah. So I can understand it.
Unless they ever decide to switch it to golf style, where i3 is the best.
Yeah, there we go. I do think that the i9 part probably shouldn't have been named i9, though. I don't think that made sense for mobile, because it's literally the 8850H just unlocked. So they should have just left it an i7, in my opinion, because we've had unlocked HK series i7s on mobile before. But whatever, I guess. There's also the i5-8300H, which is a slightly lower clocked 8400H, quad-core 8 threads. There's a couple Xeon mobile parts that got released as well. There is the 2186M, the E2186M, and that is a 2.9 gigahertz base, 4.8 gigahertz boost, 6-core 12-thread. Oh, wait, it's identical to the 8950K, just not overclockable, and it has ECC support. Okay, woo. And then there's also the Xeon E2176M, which is 2.7 gigahertz base, 4.4 gigahertz boost on the single core boost, 6-core 12-thread, also with ECC support. So basically the difference is no overclocking, but you get ECC support. Mobile workstations... And no GPU, yes. Mobile workstations, I guess, makes sense for ECC to be supported on that, but I'm still a little bit annoyed with the fact that Ryzen has ECC support across the board, and Intel doesn't do anything similar to that. It's like you have to buy a Xeon, meaning you can't overclock if you're using ECC memory. You can't, and not that you would necessarily want to overclock with ECC memory, not that that's very common, but I still would like to see the flexibility there. That's an area that AMD is really competitive in. Is it's like, hey, do I want ECC RAM? It doesn't matter. I don't have to think about it if I want it later. If I wanted to do ECC from my workstation, no, I'm not gonna. But if I wanted to, I have the ability to do so, right? So anyway, it's pretty cool though. I'm excited to see 12-core parts on laptops, and here's why I'm a little bit disappointed in this. We'll talk about it a little more later, but 6-core laptops, and I just bought a quad-core laptop, so we'll talk about the details of that more later when I talk about Dell's news. So anyway, yeah, so there's also there's new U-series CPUs. These are only a little bit different. So they released a new lineup here. Oh, that is the same link. I don't know why that's there. Oh, here we go. All right, so the new U-series CPUs, they're basically the same thing. I mean, we've had the quad-core U-series CPUs for a while, so that's not new. It's a slightly higher TDP version of their Ultrabook series, which allows them to do a little bit higher clock speeds, as well as it has better integrated graphics. They're called Iris Plus graphics. So basically a little better, but still worthless.
I mean, depends on what you're using it for.
I mean, any kind of gaming, worthless.
Well, yeah.
But I mean, at that point,
but it's
why
also a U-series chip.
It is a U-series chip, right? But at that point, it's like, what was the point of what was the point of them releasing mid-cycle, or actually not even really mid-cycle? Like, here's new stuff. A couple months later, like 2 months later, here's new stuff. Oh, the graphics are a little better. Okay, like we had any issues with the graphics on the previous one? They could all play 4K just fine.
Yeah.
Like,
there might be there might be some behind the scenes stuff as far as decoding for specific encrypted videos and things like that.
I didn't hear anything about it, but that could be.
But that's why I said behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Like, they haven't talked about it, but there might be stuff for things they want to release.
That could be. That's possible, I suppose. But
they have the hardware ready. They just don't have the software, so they're just like,
right.
It says plus.
So I guess maybe so. It's still just a little weird to me, though. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, here's this refresh. It's literally just slightly better graphics. You're still going to be basically useless for anything. Like, if you need better graphics performance than the current U-series processors, like the 8550U, why in the world, like, if you need better, why are you going with an Ultrabook CPU? That just doesn't make sense to me personally. Yeah. But anyway, so there's the 8559U. So these are all with a 9 at the end. That's basically what replaced them. That just identifies the better graphics. There's the i5-8269U. There's the i5-8259U and the i3-8109U. So now the nomenclature gets even more confusing, and I don't like it personally. Yeah, so there's that. Then there's new chipsets from Intel. We've got a whole lot of Intel news here. It's kind of ridiculous. So there's new chipsets from Intel that finally got released, that we've been waiting for them to get released since the Z370 series came out. But as we know, Intel rushed all their newest parts out as fast as they possibly could because AMD was all of a sudden relevant again, so they better start pushing money into it, right? Let's start actually innovating again. Oh, why didn't you do that just constantly? Jeez.
Because that costs money.
Because that costs money and it eats profit.
Instead, they can start working on an IoT division and then cancel it.
Yeah, exactly. They can do that. They can work on a mobile phone division and then cancel it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's because they got in too late.
I know. But
that was just... the IoT and Maker stuff is a lot different because that's still a very, very much growing market.
It was a big market for them too. There was a lot of people in that market, and
whereas
it's growing.
The mobile phone market, they kind of just
So what you're telling me is when a market's booming, they enter late, but when a market's not booming, they enter, and when it starts booming, they leave.
Yeah.
Okay.
In other words, they're bad at business.
Yeah, apparently. Which, I mean,
they also
we've known that for a while.
By giving up in the mobile market, they're just like, yeah, monopolies suck. But unless they're ours.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's correct. And it's like they could work harder, you know, like, come on. So anyway, so there's 3 new chipsets out from Intel right now. There's the H370 series, and it's a seemingly high-end offering, which is actually kind of weird because this is technically on paper the B350 competitor in a lot of ways, although the next one may sound more like it, right? Yeah. But the next one is more like an A320 competitor. Excuse me. So it's kind of weird to see high-end offerings that are from the H series. Like, I don't think anybody looking at expensive motherboards like that are going to be like, oh, I want to save $10 on my $170 motherboard to get the non-overclockable chipset. It's a little bit weird from some of the pricing I've seen. You know, it's not horrible. Actually, you should do some research on the pricing. Yeah, just go to Newegg and just type in H370 or something, or H370. But it's just kind of weird. Now there's some more mid-range parts that I've seen, but there's a lot of really high-end parts. See what I mean? Like those are H370, and yeah, a lot of them are like 140, 130 bucks, and at that point it's like, spend $10 or $15 to get the Z series chipset. It doesn't make sense to get all the limitations that I'm about to go over. So there's the issue of only one PCI Express X16 slot is the configuration there. Wireless AC support. Now that's kind of interesting because it's actually support for Intel's wireless AC standard, which means some of that's actually done on board on the chipset, as far as I understand, which is a little weird, but looks to be interesting and be cheaper for vendors to implement. Now, there's 4 Gen 2 and 8 Gen 1 USB 3.1 ports, and that's kind of a big deal because there was 0 on Z370. As far as I understand, there was 0 Gen 2 ports. Kind of weird. At least on board on the chipset. It doesn't mean those couldn't have been added in by other means. 20 PCI Express lanes, 2 PCIe storage devices, so that's actually another limit because Z370 supports 3 from my understanding, and there is RAID support. So it's like, it's a kind of decent downgrade, especially with the lack of overclocking support for RAM and CPU, but at a not big price saving. So that's kind of weird. Yeah. So anyway, that's that. Then there's B360. Like I said, sounds more like a B350 competitor, right? But in my personal opinion, this is more of an A320 competitor.
One thing I do want to mention, so it looks like from what I can see comparing similar motherboards just between the chipsets, it is like I'm comparing 2 GB Gaming 3 AORUS motherboards. So the exact same tier of motherboard between 2 different chipsets. It is $10 in price difference. However, you're getting the Wi-Fi included with that $10 cheaper H370
Okay,
motherboard.
And that's a good
point. So if
yeah.
you're going for, let's say you're a gamer who's going for a non-overclockable graphics card, CPU, you also get Wi-Fi for spending less money.
Okay, and that's understandable.
So it's getting its value elsewhere, not in the price savings.
The one thing about that is B360 also has that same wireless AC support.
Yeah.
So,
but
I feel like at
not
that
going to
point,
get the gaming tier motherboards that you would.
But the gaming tier motherboards are just built better for overclocking. You know what I mean? Like if you're going for a non-overclockable CPU, I suppose, and they could still do that on the B series, but there's going to be a lot less of that. So I can understand that, I guess. But I feel like if you're going for a non-overclockable CPU and you're not going to be doing a lot of overclocking on your GPU and stuff, B360 probably makes a little more sense. Now it's still 1 by 16 PCI Express configuration. It has the wireless AC support, like I said. 4 Gen 2 and only 6 Gen 1 USB 3.1 ports. 12 total PCI lanes total that the chipset has bandwidth-wise, and only 1 PCI Express storage option. What's up? You find something funny?
Yeah, so Gigabyte didn't really remake this ad completely for this. So this is the H370. It even has the Intel Wi-Fi, so we know it's like for Intel. And then as you scroll down, it says for Intel.
Okay, I see that. Yep.
And then we keep going down. Mentions Intel again. Recommended configuration for VR, Ryzen.
Hey! It says Ryzen 7 processors. Oh my goodness. And then it's talking about X370 and B350. Oh man.
I'm gonna tweet them.
Wow, that is bad. Unless Newegg's pulled the old ad. That's possible.
I'm still gonna tweet.
But yeah, that's awesome. Pretty bad. That's awesome. Man. Oh man. Okay, and then there's the H310 chipset, which is the lower end chipset. It's mostly the same as the above, but in terms of
actually no, I'm gonna post that on Reddit.
There you go. Good idea. So but it only has 2 or 1 dim channel options, so the other ones all are 2. This one you can actually have a single channel setup if you wish, and only 6 Gen 2 PCIe lanes, so there's no USB 3.1 Gen 2, and 4 Gen 1 of the USB 3.1 though, so there's no Gen 2, which is kind of like, not a big deal though for such a low-end chipset, and then there's no PCI Express storage. So honestly, something you just shouldn't even think about doing unless you're building like just a home theater PC or something of the sort. But you know. Anyway, all right, so Intel's desktop CPUs, there was a little bit of an update on some of those as well. A lot of stuff from Intel, as you can hear. So there is the T nomenclature, which, from my understanding here, actually, hold on. They're 35-watt parts, so they're a lower-end part. I think that's the only actual proper change. So yeah, they're literally just lower-end desktop CPUs that are a little bit cheaper, and the iGPU on them pretty much matches across the board to the original series. I'm not going to read off all the SKUs, but basically if you see a T at the end of a desktop processor, so like you have the 8700K, the 8700, and then the 8700T. The T is just a lower TDP version, which is probably going to be built more for like ITX systems and stuff like that. It's 35 watts down from like 65 watts in that specific instance. In fact, all of these, it's 35 versus 65 watt parts from my understanding, until you get into the Pentium series. Then it's like 35 versus 54 watts. Just a lower TDP, which is something that is, I don't know, it's not that huge of a deal. Maybe it's going to help with really small LAN PCs, but mostly I think it's going to be the really, really compact ITX boxes that we've been seeing coming out from a lot of manufacturers that don't have very good cooling capacity. This is like we adjusted clock speeds and lowered the price a little bit, and then you can throw it in something like that so that you can still get decent performance and get the same amount of cores and threads and stuff like that as the other ones in the series. I think it's a little bit of a meaningless area. I feel like Intel is just like release stuff because people will talk about it, and Intel will be around on the news more because it's not a huge deal in my personal opinion. But excuse me. Now, do you want to talk about the Apple and Intel news? I know we have a guest that wanted to talk about that as well, in terms of Apple potentially ditching Intel in terms of the CPU.
Not remotely surprising.
Not remotely surprising, but I think it would be surprising to more people than you think it would be. It's not surprising to us, but I think it's surprising to others. Alex, do you want to come over here?
Sure.
You want to come? All right, you wanted to talk about it. Who's getting up? Who's
you?
getting up? I'm getting up?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
You don't even like Apple.
I know. This is true.
All you're going to do is be fuck Apple.
Hey, don't swear on this podcast.
Okay.
Jeez.
We're already demonetized. Get out of here.
It's true. Yeah. You're gonna be sitting here.
I mean, how do I make my way there?
You walk.
You walk.
Which way do I walk?
I don't know. Why don't you figure it out? You're here to talk about news. You're supposed to be a smart guy, and they can't even figure out how to walk. Let me take my phone. I'm gonna walk away.
I got these. Ooh, nice laptop.
You know, it's live right now.
What's that guy do then? You ready to talk about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was this report earlier this week that Bloomberg came out with that Apple might be ditching Intel for their processors and their Mac computers.
Yeah, so, I mean, personally, I wasn't remotely surprised. We've been hearing rumors that Apple was kind of looking towards the desktop for a while, or less desktop and laptop. And at least on anything other than their pro-grade hardware, I think this just makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, the last time they were with IBM until 2006, then they moved to Intel. And on their phones, they use their own chips already.
Yeah, I think the only thing they use really Intel for on mobile is for the radios.
Yeah, that's what.
Which is why they keep getting super gig by Qualcomm.
Yeah. But and also, 5% of Intel's revenue comes from Apple using Intel's processor, so that'll be interesting for Intel.
Yeah, but it was interesting. Their stocks dropped like 8% with this news. I could see it dropping 5% because that's 5% of their business.
Yeah.
But it dropping more than that makes no sense. Apple's not going to go out and sell this to other companies. This is going to be for Apple.
Yeah.
So they're losing at most 5% of their business, realistically less because they're going to still probably use Intel for Wi-Fi, I'm assuming, because they need a Wi-Fi modem.
Yeah.
So Intel's probably going to be down 3% from this, which is fairly negligible.
But right now,
it
was just like thinking about it. They're not confirmed to do it. So.
But if they do it, my biggest interest, because like I always figured when they did this, it would be as they make iOS for iPad closer to macOS, and eventually they would probably
they want to get the iOS apps to run on Mac
too. But then at that point, how do they deal with things like Final Cut? having to completely rebuild Final Cut to work on an ARM chip would be quite significant, and that alone is a huge selling point of MacBook Pros for like YouTubers, for example. So that's gonna be one thing, and then also they already have a hard time getting games on their platform. Having ARM is gonna like kill that. I mean, they'll have Fortnite because Fortnite's already on iOS. Yeah. So
I wonder if it'll affect the sales of the Mac or not. If it'll help them sell Macs more, or
if they can make it for cheaper, while not compromising on performance for average users, I think that can help. Especially now
battery life improvements would be a big thing. I don't know if you mentioned that, but
not yet.
I think that's something to talk about.
Yeah. And then also now that Thunderbolt is going free to use later this year, that kind of gives them the freedom to do this without compromising on what they've been building towards on laptops for a while now. Yeah. And then, as Ethan mentioned in the background about battery life, I ultimately expect them to shrink the batteries when they make this move, but that's because they do want to move towards wireless charging. Wireless charging for long periods of time is not particularly good for batteries. So if they can get a full day's or 8 hours worth of usage of battery on a laptop with a smaller battery, that's going to make them more likely to switch to that wireless charging. And they've already said they want to get rid of cables completely.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting if they do make the decision how Intel stock will...
I'm sure the market will overreact dramatically. It's so dumb for them to have lost 8% off of a rumor that doesn't affect 8% of the business.
But more competition is always good too.
Yeah. So. Well, really, this isn't more competition. This is just Apple ignoring the competition.
No. Yeah.
But I mean,
it's Apple getting out of the fight.
If Macs perform different and perform better on certain tasks, it incentivizes the other CPU manufacturers to push for doing the same thing. So if these ARM chips, if they're ARM-based chips, which they probably will be, if they are substantially more powerful or substantially better in battery life, for the same power consumption as an example, I think that would really push Intel and AMD into the market of trying to make even more efficient CPUs. And Intel would dump more money into the R&D for that sort of thing. Assuming
that Apple can figure out a x86 layer to run over ARM that does not impact performance significantly. Yeah. Because if they gain a bunch of performance but then lose Adobe Suite, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I think there's some truth to that, but
we've seen Microsoft
if
have
you're
it,
on
but
Mac and you're a lot of software though, you should be using Apple software. In terms of if you're editing on a Mac, you should probably be using Final Cut.
But there's still situations where Adobe software comes in handy to use alongside it.
Yeah.
For example, you'd want to use
After Effects.
After Effects for motion graphics.
Yeah.
So, I think that this would most likely hit its way to a standard MacBook though first.
Yeah, I think it said in the report they would start with the 12-inch MacBook, the regular Mac.
And I think that makes the most sense to me as well. I don't see this going towards the Pro direction, especially because in terms of x86 performance, it's if this affects it drastically, it doesn't make sense for them to do it on the Pro machine, because that's where things like Adobe would be getting used.
Yeah, I think that this would make sense for them to launch alongside the new all wireless MacBook, because they did say before that they will get rid of ports when they have wireless charging.
So if they're getting rid of ports, is it going to be waterproof?
No.
Oh, so there's no point in getting rid of ports.
Yeah.
I mean, the benefit, I guess, the benefit would be that, you remove a little bit of PCB on the side so you can fit a larger battery, but that's about it.
But they're not going to do a larger battery.
No, exactly. So it's literally just, we can say we have no ports on the laptop. It's great.
Yeah.
And just remember, if your laptop's almost dead and you're on the go, you're going to have to pick up a giant pad that you carry around in your bag to put under it to plug it in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that direction.
But it depends. They are on the Qi Charging Consortium. They know what's coming in a few years.
Right, and that's true. But, as an example, if I can't watch 24 hours of video on the thing on one charge, then they need to rethink what they're doing in terms of only having wireless charging.
I mean, we'll see. Because they might have a system where you can have a battery in your back, or it's literally just sitting next to it that charges it.
Yeah, and that's yeah.
And that already then puts it ahead of anything any other laptop has, because you don't have to plug it in.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So if it's equal battery life and you can just set something next to it and you're good, not like physically on it.
Right.
And again, I think that there was a reason they finally joined the Qi Charging Consortium instead of making their own.
And I guess that's
because if they wanted to make their own, they would have.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to add for that?
Is there anything else you want to talk about before I jump back in? About anything?
Anything.
I mean, the color of your hair.
Spotify going public.
Oh yeah, that was interesting. I use Spotify, but I didn't really read much about the subject of the IPO thing.
Pretty much, they opened at like $30 higher than expected, which was pretty good because it upped their evaluation quite a bit, or their valuation. But other than that, now they're just a standard public company. Like it wasn't anything really all that special, which is normal. But my interest or my question is to see how this affects Spotify in the long term, especially when they have so many pending lawsuits over different things, some of which are valid, some of which are really dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally one of them is essentially because they didn't send out paper.
Wow.
Yeah. Spotify lawsuits are complicated. Because music IPs, especially for songwriters, is really dumb.
Yeah.
Because their pay is fixed. For people that don't know, for songwriters, you don't get paid. Like you can't like negotiate your pay up. The government sets your pay. And so if you write a song and that song gets used, you don't have a say in whether or not it can be on the platform. But that company has to send you a letter stating they'll pay you, and then they'll pay you. Spotify, for example, with the lawsuit that happened, they have all of their money in an account. They just don't have an easy way to get a hold of the people to pay them.
Wow.
So they're getting sued. Not because they don't want to pay them, not because they're keeping the money. They just can't get a hold of it. It's so dumb.
Yeah.
So
where did Ethan go?
I think he went to take care of his dog beating on the floor.
Oh, yeah, that was pretty crazy. So
Ethan!
he's upstairs.
I know. I just want to yell at him.
Waiting for him to come back so I can jump out.
Yeah. Yeah, because he'll probably want to talk about...
No, you want to jump in?
Sure.
I feel awkward being here now.
Why do you feel awkward? Get used to it.
Because I'm not talking about anything.
I'm going to step past you guys again. Hey, you're live. Stop it. My face. Okay. I can't bring you guys here anymore. There's too much background crap going on because of you two. Alright. So, we're ready to jump back into where we were? Because we got a lot more to talk about here. Oh, and hi everybody, I'm back. So, you know.
Really?
It's a thing.
They
I don't know.
can't see that.
Nobody probably noticed, you know. I look very similar to him, so, yeah. Very, very similar. Alright, so, some confirmation about GDDR6 memory production, which leads us to believe that new GPUs might be coming out fairly soon. So GDDR6, made by SK Hynix, Samsung also has already entered full production, but as we know, NVIDIA partners very commonly with SK Hynix, not Samsung. So SK Hynix is ramping up to full production 3 months from about a couple days ago, according to Gamers Nexus, I believe was actually the original to report on it. And NVIDIA's new GPUs are highly likely to be using GDDR6. It just makes sense. And like I said, they tend to partner with SK Hynix. Now, GDDR6 is already at a 20% higher cost right now versus GDDR5X. So that's pretty spendy, which means GPU prices are likely to be higher than we would than we would expect, right? Now, Samsung, like I said, already makes 16 gigabit per second GDDR or 16 gigabit GDDR6. So it's kind of interesting to see, you know, SK Hynix is a little bit behind, but that also isn't completely surprising because Samsung tends to be really far ahead in terms of silicon because they just have so much money. But the rumors related to this is that we think we'll see a launch of the GeForce 11 or 20, probably 11 series in July is the estimation, which means obviously it won't be coming out right away, although sometimes NVIDIA in the past, you know, they have been like, here, you can buy it right now, but maybe it'll just be a pre-order for a while or something like that. Interesting to see. It's exciting. I hope new GPUs are coming out. I also would like to see something new from Team Red. to compete with whatever NVIDIA is probably releasing this year.
Yeah.
I don't know if we will. Maybe we'll see some 12 nanometer refreshed Vega chips. Maybe ones that are a little bit more power efficient and also maybe clock even a little bit higher and are even cheaper, because if TSMC has been, or sorry, not TSMC, Global Foundries has been keeping up with production, they might actually be able to sell Vega chips for fairly cheap in the future. So they might actually be able to sell them for MSRP, and hopefully the miners don't take over, which we actually have a little bit more on why mining might be kind of dying in terms of desktop gaming GPUs being used for it.
Until another crypto comes around.
Until another one, yeah, another algorithm. So anyway, so Mushkin SSDs, there's some new ones coming out from Mushkin. Mushkin is a American company, and they make pretty solid SSDs. They haven't been like any super big leaders in the industry in terms of performance, but they have been oftentimes leaders in terms of not performance but price to performance ratios. They've been pretty solid in terms of their pricing, and it looks like they're trying to do that again. So 120 gigabyte SSD, these are SATA based, for $39, and a 500 gigabyte for $110.
That is 500 gig.
Yeah, that is really cheap. Now, the performance isn't amazingly impressive, but then again, it's still close to the cap of what SATA 6 is capable of. So, like, at this point, it's like, oh, this SSD is faster than this one, or, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's all SATA. If you're comparing speeds, you got to be going PCIe for them, either M.2 or a physical PCI Express slot card. Now, in terms... Sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, with SSDs at this price... for a lot of people, this like minor speed differences wouldn't matter anyway, because like you're now getting to the point where it just makes, I mean, it already made sense for a lot of people, but now for almost everyone it just makes sense to just get an SSD instead of a hard drive.
Yeah, exactly. Hard drives are gonna die more in terms of general consumer.
Yeah.
In terms of the gamer, we're still gonna see hard drives around for a while, especially with games continuing to grow in size. Also, the Mac Geek says hi, so I say hi.
I think I think that what we could start to see though with them coming down in price like this is large SSDs for like the bigger games.
Yeah, well, the kind of like
OS,
the setup I'm going to be doing.
Or like, I mean, even how I have it, like, because I have a 512 gig NVMe.
Right.
And I have my OS, most of my applications, and like my big games, or my
most played ones,
yes.
or at least what I try to do in terms of balancing games in terms of SSDs versus hard drives and what I'm putting them on is what games actually properly benefit from the performance improvement. Because like WoW loading on an SSD, oh, it's so much better. But like Overwatch, I have Overwatch running on a RAID 0 set of SSDs. Now it's not that much better than my RAID 0 set of hard drives.
But you can pick a character 3 seconds faster than someone else.
That's true.
That means that when new characters come out, you
get the new character.
Especially since they're changing it so that you can double click on the character to select it rather than having to click the character and click select.
Yes.
So you can hover your mouse over it.
Have they implemented that change yet?
I think it's in PTR.
Okay, I was gonna say I didn't. Okay, yeah.
So if you
just know where your character is, and you just
don't click. Yeah,
you just click as fast as you can until you get it.
Unless you because if you triple, it'll.
Oh, does it deselect? Is that what it does?
So.
Oh, okay. So you can't just be like, wee. Okay. Anyway, yeah, I mean, this is similar to like a kind of setup that I'm going to be doing, right? Is it's like I've got my two 4 terabyte hard drives in RAID 0, and then I'm going to have either 2 or 3 configuration of SSDs of some sort in RAID 0, SATA-based SSDs, and those are all for my games, right? I've got the 4 terabytes for games that don't benefit or that are substantially larger, you know, some that are over 100 gigabytes, it's ridiculous, but then the ones that I want to perform faster, Overwatch being an example, but also the games like World of Warcraft and stuff, I throw them on the RAID configuration of the SSDs. Yeah. Now that's a little bit on the extreme end, but I think that makes sense. Is I think we're going to see, we're still going to see the SSD and HDD setup for a lot of gaming rigs, but we're just going to more commonly see a bigger SSD with some games on it, if that makes any sense. So, also in terms of, Gate95 asked a question, any news about those i9 CPUs for laptops? We did talk about them a little bit earlier in the podcast.
And we'll get into a couple products that have
them. So we'll be getting into products that are using those new CPUs, but we already talked about the SKUs of them, and we have a lot of news to get through this week, so I guess a quick rundown is 6-core, 12-thread CPUs for laptops, and the i9 is just the indication of the higher-end part, which is overclockable. Pretty cool stuff to see that on laptops.
And we might see other i9s in the future that aren't overclockable, but that also feature things like the higher cache of the
I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we see i9s on mobile that are in particular gaming machines that are 8 cores instead. Because I mean, we've already been seeing Ryzen parts that are 8 cores in laptops, right? Now those are for high performance gaming machines, and those are desktop CPUs that are slotted in and socketed in, just like we've seen with some Intel CPUs. But still, it's pretty cool to see. Now back to the Mushkin SSDs though. The 500 gigabyte is rated at 560 megabytes per second read and 520 megabytes per second writes, along with 75,000 4K read IOPS and 81,000 4K write IOPS. So the IOPS are a little low even for a SATA SSD, but not really that bad, and considering the super cheap price of these, pretty awesome. Now there's this that's kind of like, it's a little weird. Basically, so Intel's changing their naming scheme a little bit to identify Optane, which is their 3D Crosspoint SSD technology, being paired up with a given CPU. So you know how you have like i3 dash or minus, as some might call it, and then the number nomenclature. Well, what we're going to see now is whatever the number is. So i3 is an example with a plus and then the SKU, and the plus indicates that it has a Optane memory caching drive built into it. It's kind of weird. I don't really personally love the nomenclature myself, but I feel like that's something that should be kind of as a separate SKU, but I can kind of understand them wanting to simplify it to consumers. A basic consumer being like, oh, well, the Plus series are a little bit faster in terms of responsiveness. And they're also going to be cheaper in terms of the amount of storage you're getting. But it's just kind of weird to see like in, i3 plus 8100, as an example, is just kind of weird. But anyway, yeah, it can be used to accelerate an OS or data drive. Now that's another new part. We've had Optane memory that could accelerate your operating system for a while, but you couldn't use it to accelerate any data drive. Now with this setup, you'll be able to. I think that's pretty cool, but also laptops are moving away from multiple drives pretty consistently. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know if it really matters that much, because if you're spending enough to spend a lot of money on a high-end CPU, you probably aren't going to be using Optane to accelerate stuff. You're just going to get a big SSD, a big NVMe SSD, right? So I think for the high-end, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. And then the mid-range, it's like, well, who needs to accelerate anything at that point? But also, with my personal experience of having an Optane drive for my boot drive, it is a lot faster. It's substantially more responsive. It is actually a noticeable improvement over an SSD. Not quite as drastic as going from a hard drive to an SSD. But, it's fast enough that you could potentially have a hard drive in a laptop, or even a SATA SSD or something like that, or even a M.2 SSD, but that's running over a SATA, right? Yeah. And accelerate that with this, and that'll probably be more responsive and be interesting to consumers and entice them to purchase it. So moving on to more SSDs. Oh yeah, and the Gate 95 says, he's like, I stopped trying to understand manufacturers' nomenclatures for ages. Yeah, it's just like, it gets so complicated. It's like, it's not even worth it.
I do have one question about the Optane. Yeah. Could this be used to accelerate external hard drives?
Now that's an interesting question. I don't think so.
Because that would be to me, that would be even better.
That would actually be somewhat sensible. Yeah. That would actually be useful for somebody that's doing productivity on the go, right? But I don't necessarily think so. I don't think that that's something that's going to be likely for them to be able to do, because in order to cache properly, you'd have to be a hard drive that you plug in before you boot up, and consumers are going to make the mistake of not doing that a lot.
They might be able to figure out something with Thunderbolt, since they control Thunderbolt. Maybe not in 3, but in a future variant.
Maybe so. There's something they can maybe do to make that work. That'd be genuinely useful. You can accelerate a big data drive or something like that externally.
Yeah, because we've talked about before, I have a theory that Intel is, along with their releasing Thunderbolt 3 for free, at some point in the near future, they'll have Thunderbolt 4 for themselves as a timed exclusive. Right. And then eventually open that up as they prep Thunderbolt 5 and just keep doing that, where they constantly upgrade the version of Thunderbolt that's available for everyone. But they give themselves...
theirs is a little bit of a gap, and they're a little bit of ahead of the game.
Yeah, that way they get some benefit. They can incentivize people to buy their products to make up the R&D cost, but then they still open it up to everyone.
Right, and it's a good... It's a good business model, I think. I'm excited to see where Thunderbolt goes myself. I also think that they need to set some more strict standards in terms of how many PCI Express lanes are used on a given Thunderbolt port and stuff like that. Because my XPS 15 here, for example, only has 2 PCI Express lanes running through that Thunderbolt port instead of the standard of 4. And not that that affects me directly, because I don't use external SSDs for editing, but like if this was an editing machine for me or something and I was using external SSDs, seeing a big performance drop would suck.
But if you're doing editing on the go, you should just get a MacBook.
I mean, you get my point though. More strict
Yeah, I do.
standards for Thunderbolt, I think, would be a good thing. Don't let them
you
toy
want
with it.
Intel?
Don't let them literally cut it in half. It's like Dell was just like, oh, it's Thunderbolt 3 at, half the performance.
You want Intel to be more strict.
That's really weird coming out of my mouth. But you get what I mean, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, well, it's weird if you look through the product page for the XPS 9560, not the 9570, more on that later, but the 9560, they actually talk about Thunderbolt 3, and they talk about 32 gigabits per second. But then at the bottom they say 2 PCI Express lanes, only 16 gigabits per second. And it's like, you literally are advertising it because the Thunderbolt 3 standard is 32 gigabits per second. That's not okay with me, Dell. So Kingston released a new NVMe SSD. This is the first NVMe SSD, I believe, from Kingston, as well as the first to use 3D NAND, I think. And so it's the Kingston A1000. It's a PCI Express 3.0 Gen 2 interface. Again, like, this is frustrating me. Why are we seeing PCI Express 2 lanes? Sorry, PCI Express 3.0 2 lanes SSDs. I don't like seeing that on any SSD myself, because that does hinder the potential bandwidth, and a lot of these are actually, a lot of these SSDs are capable of pushing past the performance that is warranted out of 2 lanes of PCI Express.
Yeah.
And so I don't like the idea of using 2 lanes on what's supposed to be a high performance part, because it just doesn't make sense to me. Give it more bandwidth. Most slots support more bandwidth. Most M.2 slots are either SATA or they're 4 lanes. It's not very common that you see only 2 lanes, so it's kind of weird. Anyway, it's using the Ryzen 5008 controller, and they have a 960 gigabyte maximum capacity with the rated performance of 1.5 gigabytes per second read and 1 gigabytes per second write. There's also a 480 gigabyte and 240 gigabyte models with about 100 megabytes per second drop in write per tier. So you'd be looking at like 1.4 gigabytes per second on the 480 gig and 1.3 gigabytes per second on the 240 gig. So not a massive drop off. The Ryzen controller is pretty solid, so I can understand that. And it comes with a 5-year warranty. That is the part I do like to see. But please, manufacturers, just stop making NVMe SSDs running over PCI Express with 2 lanes. I don't understand. Like, I just do 4 lanes. I don't understand the development cost behind that isn't that much higher, so just do it, please. Okay, so now we're going to move into a plethora. And by plethora, I mean like 2.5 pages of laptops for you guys. So we're going to be shooting through most of these pretty quickly, although the Dell section is the one I really want to cover. Most of these other brands out here, they're all very similar. They're just using a lot of the new Intel CPUs.
I did figure some stuff out for the Samsung one, though. So go ahead and start talking about that, and then I'll clarify some things.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm interested in that. Also, apparently our audio is out of sync. Let me look at that. Let me make sure my offset is set up correctly, because my offset is I have the offset set up, so it might be an issue on Twitch's end. Guys on YouTube that are watching, let me know if the audio appears to be out of sync to you guys, because I'd be interested in that. I'll try and fix it if so, but it doesn't appear that it should be. So I don't know why. Maybe Twitch is having some kind of issue right now or something. If YouTube's off too, then it's on our end. So anyway, yeah. So let's jump over into the fun laptops here. So the Samsung one's really interesting, and so I actually put this at the beginning because this one is one I wanted to focus on a little bit more than all the rest as well. So basically this one and the Dell laptops are what's important here. So this is the Samsung Odyssey Z notebook. And it's using a 15.6-inch display. It's a gaming laptop with a GTX 1060 6GB model, 6-core CPUs, which we'd expect. I didn't see what model CPU in specific, but I would guess it's the 8850H would be my guess. But, not entirely sure. I don't think it would be the HK model in this machine, though. 16 gigabytes of RAM is the maximum reported. That is really dumb, in my opinion, on a high-performance, 15-inch thick gaming notebook. Just... Please, I don't understand why you only have 16 gigabytes. Now, maybe it's soldered. Yeah, it's also one of the weird layouts with the keyboard towards the front.
And it is the i7's 8750H.
8750H, not the 8850H. Okay, so slightly lower performance, but still very high performance 6 cores. And it does look really nice. I just don't like the frontal keyboard layout. The keyboard being towards the front is just lame in my opinion.
It also doesn't have
I've never liked that. It also, it doesn't have Thunderbolt, so the I/O is a little weird. And so it's a little weird. Samsung's never been amazing at making laptops, in my opinion, though. But here's the reason I wanted to bring this up. Here's why this was important. Because it in itself doesn't sound that exciting. It's like, okay, it's a 6-core laptop. We expect that. There's some weird limitations that don't make sense for a machine of this caliber. This is using the GTX 1060 Max P. Not Max Q, which we've already seen, right? Now, Max Q technology, the nomenclature for it is Max Q, basically slightly underclocked variants of GPUs like the 1070 and stuff.
There's a lot more to it.
There's more.
That.
Well, it's more power
there's
and
custom software for fan curves and things.
Right.
Like
It's
that.
more power and performance balancing, right?
That's where, so I was doing some research into this to try and figure out what Max P was, because NVIDIA doesn't specify anything on their website.
At least not yet, yeah.
And what I found was for some of their other stuff, their Jetson TX2 chip, and a lot of their other like super high-end stuff, the Max Q and Max P terms were actually used like before Max Q laptops. Max Q and Max P are used in their high-end stuff. Max Q is their efficiency mode. Max P is their performance mode. So essentially...
But the performance mode is still, in theory... but what they're still claiming here is that it's still lower performance than your standard. So, like,
yes.
You have 1060, you have 1060 Max P, you have 1060 Max Q.
Yes.
So it's an in-between.
Yes.
Okay.
And presumably we could end up seeing, eventually, based on how they handle things with the TX2... They might even release a chip that, based on software, can switch between both. But
both different modes,
yes.
right. And so then you can adjust your battery life and your performance according to what you're doing. And at that point, also, if cooling was a factor, you could have like Max P for being plugged in, Max Q for when you're on the go.
Now, so, my guess is Samsung said, hey, we have more range for cooling on this. We want a little, can you give us a little bit more powerful
And so this was
GPU?
kind of developed for them.
Yeah, this was essentially, they take some of the, they essentially just...
They're like, we don't need a Max Q, but a 1060 is really pushing it without that.
So they probably did some fan curve alteration to allow it to run higher. I wouldn't doubt if it has more cooling, then obviously they don't need to run the fans as much to keep it cool as if they were to run a regular Max Q at this speed.
Yeah,
so this is their in-between, which we already knew, but it's actually based on stuff that they already do for their TX2 and their other really high-end hardware.
Okay, so this is interesting to me because so what we've seen is Max Q tends to be a slight performance degradation over the original part, right? And the original parts are the desktop GPUs transferred over, right?
Yes.
Now, what's weird to me is I feel like there wasn't a lot of space for another tier in there. You know what I mean? I feel like it's like, okay, so we dropped the performance by, like 15% in a lot of cases. Max P is estimated to be about a 10% performance improvement. So it's just like 5% below standard.
It would be closer to about 7-ish, 7.5, because you have to take into account...
They claimed, though, I believe it was Samsung that claimed it was a
10%
over Max Q.
But that's based on Max Q's performance.
Right, okay, so it would be closer to like 7. You're right. Okay, that makes sense.
So it's essentially, it really comes down to, I feel like, because we've seen NVIDIA recently, we talked about last week, a chip that was a slight alteration on an existing one, that it seemed like it was because manufacturers asked for this. It seems like NVIDIA is getting this feedback from manufacturers and just saying,
doing something about it, and just be giving it to them,
Especially when it's something like this where it's probably just software. I don't think this is a different
This isn't like
chip.
Yeah, no, not at all. And neither was the Max Q chips generally. I mean, sometimes they're a little bit better binned so that they can hit better performance tiers at lower power consumption. But generally speaking, it's the same thing. It's just kind of weird. Now, in my opinion, I'd like to see some testing involving this, but I think this just puts more confusion on the consumers ultimately, because they have to choose between a Max Q or a Max P laptop. They don't necessarily know what the differences are.
Especially when they don't even explain it to us.
Exactly. Like us, we had to go researching forums to figure this out, right? And so it's like, NVIDIA is like a couple things of recent, right, have been making me go, and there's some 1030 news that I'm going to mention that's not in here, so I'll mention this in a moment. But it's like NVIDIA talks about their whole, GeForce Partner Program because they want to simplify nomenclature, make it simpler on the gamer, and then they do crap like this every which way. We got the issue between the MX150 and the 1050 or 1030, right? So we got the MX150 and the 1030, and then there's a lower end variant of the MX150, right? And so it's like, okay, so that confuses people because it's the same name. And why did they call the MX150, which is a 1030, and MX150? Well, guess what? Now there's also a lower end version of the 1030 that's not talked about. So there's a 1030 that performs more like the lower end MX150. So we've literally got the same GPU, but four different tiers with 2 different names.
And then eventually they'll have a Max Q and Max P,
right?
And it's just like version 1 and version 2.
And it's just like GeForce Partner Program to be simple. Max Q, Max P, 1030, 1030, MX150, MX150. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Realistically, the GeForce Partner Program was to simplify them advertising their partners' cards.
That's it. Yeah, at that point,
because like, it comes down to.
Yeah, and it's just funny though, coming from the company that skipped the 800 series on desktop purely to simplify the nomenclature because it was too confusing to people on mobile, right? And it's like, okay. Also, getting back to the audio issue here. So yeah, people on Twitch are reporting the audio issue being about 1 second, the audio being about 1 second before the video. People on YouTube are saying it's fine. That's kind of weird to me, and it's also particularly weird because I have this set to be 1 second out of sync with the video because the capture card is a 1 second out of sync with what's actually happening, right? And so you have to delay this by 1 second, and that's always works. So I don't know why it's out of sync on Twitch. That's really weird. It's probably Twitch's problem. I don't think it's related to us directly because I've done a lot of testing to find out what the latency is in terms of the performance on the Elgato HD60. So yeah, kind of weird. But anyway, sorry to anybody that's watching on Twitch with the audio out of sync. We apologize for that. All right. Dell
I'm excited
released a lot of stuff. He's excited. I'm angry. So, all right, let's jump into it. So, we'll first jump into why I'm angry. So, Dell released the new XPS 9570. High-end laptop, really beautiful. It's using the i5 8300H quad-core or the option for the i7 8750H, which is a 6-core. There's also i9s listed, but I don't imagine this is going to be using the 8950HK, so I bet you're right. There's other tiers coming out. But the reason I'm angry, so they centered the webcam, right, instead of it being off on the side like on the older XPS machines, which is better but not great because it's still not at the top, right? So it still looks at your hands and when you're typing, it looks up your nose, etc. They also did 4 lanes of PCI Express on the Thunderbolt connector instead of the 2 lanes that the older XPSs had. They also have the option for a 1050 Ti. Right, and then other than that, it's mostly the same, and there's no magnetic levitation keyboard. So yeah, like the thinner 2-in-1 version of the XPS 15, which has been reported to be almost as bad as the MacBook keyboard, right? So it's just using magnets instead of the butterfly switches. So I'm glad they kept what appears to be the exact same keyboard.
So still better than the Surface.
So still, yeah, right. So anyway, why am I angry about this? Well, in case you didn't notice, I'm using an XPS right now. It's so happens to be the XPS 159560, okay? Which is fine. It's a very beautiful, very high-performance machine. I don't need more performance. But here's why it frustrates me. It's not because I own this machine and a new one came out, because we obviously, being in the tech world, we expect new stuff to come out. I expect to be, there to be a 9580 that's better than a 9570, right? The problem was, I bought this a month ago. And my only complaints about this machine were that the webcam wasn't in the center, which, by the way, it also has Windows Hello support now, from what I understand. But my complaints were that, and that it didn't have 4 lanes of PCI Express through the Thunderbolt connector. Not that I use that much, but being an objective reviewer, that bothered me, right? And then the fact that it's a 1050, it's a little bit lower performance. A 1050 Ti is better. The 1060 is a substantial jump over both of those, but still the 1050 Ti is like pushes it over that edge a little bit where it's a little more acceptable for gaming, even though this is perfectly gaming capable. So it's like, I literally could have gotten a 6-core laptop with the 3 issues I have with this one fixed if I waited a month. Now, I needed a new machine for work. I didn't want to lug my massive, horrible battery life Sager desktop replacement that had a 6700K and a 1070 everywhere with me. It was getting to be too heavy. So I'm not super angry that I purchased this. It's just like, why you do this to me, Dell?
Yeah.
You know?
I think that they could solve all of their webcam issues with a notch.
Yeah, let's not do that to Windows right now. They already have problems with scaling. Let's not give them a notch to deal with. Please.
Are you kidding? They won't deal with it.
I mean, well, yeah, right. They'll just shrink the screen lower.
No, they'll just have the notch over the...
So it's like you've got a tab in the middle.
For you, who has so many tabs that
I'd have like 14 tabs hidden behind the notch. So it's like I gotta move the mouse up.
Even if the notch was just the webcam.
Yeah, exactly. And I gotta move it up in there and figure out like which one's the tab I want. I don't know. Hopefully there. Oh nope, wrong one. Try again.
I think that the notch is the solution to all of our problems.
Let's not introduce any more display complications to Microsoft.
They should have a
They don't know how to
notch.
do anything.
For a bottom webcam. They should get rid of the bottom bezel, have a notch that's just the Dell logo and the webcam.
Please don't do that. Please don't do that.
Design the
I don't
worst-
want notches. We need to completely get rid of them. Either shrink the screen or get rid of the notch and have a pop-up
I got
camera.
it. 4 notches.
Oh no. Four notches. Okay, so you've
notch
got
on
a
the
left
top
notch, a right
no.
notch, a top notch, a bottom notch.
Yes. So
Wait,
let me explain.
but do you have diagonal notches yet?
No,
Is
so
it just a circular display at this point?
No, it's not a Moto 360.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't have a flat tire.
A flat tire.
So we have a top notch for the webcam, a bottom notch for the company logo, and 2 side notches for speakers that actually are aimed at you.
I like it. That's a great idea. You know what? Let's introduce that once Microsoft figures out scaling on Windows, which will never happen.
No.
Because, everything's still blurry. And even though my scaling on this machine is set to native resolution, even though it was set to 125% originally, some text is still blurry. I don't understand why. I literally am not scaling anything. But lots of applications that would have the same issues with scaling are blurry on this when they wouldn't be on any other machine.
Maybe it's somehow doing like a software scaling to 100%.
Yeah, that's what I think's happening. It's either software scaling to 100%, which makes no sense, or it's telling the applications that it scales, and so the applications are trying to scale to 125, but they can't. And then I'm at 100, so it's a mess.
Maybe you should have just bought in a G series.
Yes. Okay, let's jump into the G series now. This is interesting. All right, so Dell's new G series laptops are pretty impressive. Now, this is from Dell, but G meaning gaming. Mm-hmm. Let's be realistic, right? They have the G3, the G5, and the G7. They're budget-oriented gaming machines. That does not mean they're cheap, but that means you get they're value-oriented in that sense. For the G3 15-inch, it starts at $749, and for the G3 17-inch, it starts at $799. So, I mean, pretty budget-oriented. Not on the very bottom end. You can get some gaming laptops for around the $500 range, right? But these are really solid machines, and it looks like Dell has done a pretty good job of keeping the chassis structure and design similar enough between the models in a lot of ways to make it a little bit cheaper for them to manufacture, which is part of where the cost drop happens. Now, you're really happy about this, right?
Yes.
So
I am looking to get one of these because of the price to hardware. I know that the build quality will not be as good.
It's not XPS build quality, but you can't expect that for that price. It's like this machine here was $1,800. Yeah. You're going to get equal or better performance for like a grand less.
Yeah, I expect cheap gaming laptop quality like you get from like the gaming Inspiron that had
probably more similar to like the quality of this machine, right? Your HP here, right? Which is fine. I mean, it's not problematic if you take care of it.
Yeah, and I'm not going to use the keyboard and mouse that much. I mainly want the gaming portion of it so I can bring at the very least my own mouse with me and
Right, yeah, exactly. And I mean, not only that, but for LANs and stuff like that, if its performance is good enough, right? Which we'll get into the specs in a moment. You bring a monitor, and you bring your laptop, and you plug it in, you're good to go, right?
Yeah, so I'm looking more towards the G7. I see. It looks like we only got the prices for the G3s in here, but the other ones' pricing is confirmed.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
okay,
so
I wasn't sure, okay.
The G317 and the G5 15 start at the same price, $799.
Okay, which makes sense.
And then the G7 is only 15-inch, but that one is going to start at $849.
Now, there's a G7 17-inch though too, right?
Not confirmed as of
Not
yet.
confirmed.
So,
Okay.
As of right now, oddly enough, the only thing confirmed to have a 17-inch is the G3.
Okay, interesting. Because the report I read was about the G7. There was a 17-inch that had the i9, but I guess that's not confirmed.
That might have just not been in the article that I read.
Okay, that could be. Okay, yeah.
But as of right now, the only one listed on Dell's website is the G7, which starts at 1,100. And we can get into the specs of that
really
when we get to
isn't
the
bad.
G7.
Yeah.
But
okay.
We'll go through each of these.
Yeah, we'll go through some of the specs that are available on, and this is another thing is the specs are similar on a lot of them. I bet you if you took these machines apart, you'd find a lot of similar parts in terms of motherboards, in terms of I/O setups on the motherboards, in terms of heat sinks and stuff like that, right? So now all models have the option for the i5-8300HQ, which is a quad-core part, 8 threads, and then also the option for the i7-8750H, which is a 12-thread part. Again, across the whole range, according to the article I read, that is available. Right, so even on the lower end part, you could upgrade to that. Now, the G7 has been said, the G7 17-inch in specific will have the i9-8950HQ, is what the article wrote. Now, my question is it the 8950HK, meaning it's overclockable, or is this another SKU of the i9, which would be the 8950HQ, which would actually make sense, but I couldn't find, like, Googling that specific term. The only thing that I found related to this was this article. So it might have just been a typo. I'm not entirely sure, so I can't confirm that there. Now, there's 8 and 16 gigabyte configs, but you can also go up to 32 gigabytes. I believe that's across all the models, which is pretty substantial. I think that's an important upgrade there, because like my XPS here, I upgraded this to 32 gigabytes because, well, I frankly use way too much RAM for all kinds of stupid reasons. I'm using 10 gigabytes right now as an example. So I like the ability to upgrade to 32 gigabytes. I think that's important. Now, all of them also have one 2.5-inch SSD or hard drive slot available on them. Now, from my understanding, you can upgrade to the bigger battery if you want, but it sacrifices the 2.5-inch drive. That's the same thing that the XPS has done for a while. Pretty cool. I mean, I think having a 2.5-inch drive is still useful on a primarily gaming machine, so it's good that they implemented that. Whereas the XPS, I don't even think you can actually properly configure it with a 2.5-inch drive anymore. I believe you actually have to buy the smaller battery that fits in this one, and then you have this, the chassis still has the shape out for it, right? But for a gaming machine, I think that's necessary because large amounts of NVMe M.2 storage is expensive. Yeah. You know, I've got the 1 terabyte in here. Getting more than 1 terabyte is not available, at least through the configuration from Dell, so I can understand them doing that. I think that's a good option. Now, the options in terms of the actual GPUs you can get the 1050, the 1050 Ti, or 1060 Max Q, which from what we've seen, the 1060 Max Q is actually really similar in performance to the standard 1060, whereas with the 1070 and 1080 Max Q, it's a little bit bigger of a drop. Now, of course, that also does vary by cooling capacity of the machine and other stuff like that. But it's got a 130 watt power brick for the 1050 models and the 1050 Ti models, and there's a 180 watt power brick for the 1060 model. The battery rating was 56 watt hours. Like I said, I think you can probably configure to a bigger battery that uses up the hard drive slot, but I can't confirm that for sure. They're all 1080p options, and then there's also a 4K option for the G5 and G7. Don't do the 4K option. It doesn't make sense at the size, in my opinion.
So Trusted Reviews has a better detailed listing of all the spec availabilities.
Okay, cool.
So on the G3, it's only and the G5, it's only the i5 and the i7.
And in terms of RAM capacity, they're all 32 gigs though. Yes. Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay, and the G3 only has the i5 and the i7 and the G5, right? Yeah. But the G7 has that extra, which i9 is listed as an HQ on there. Yes. Okay, that's the second article I've seen. So I guess that's the other SKU of the new i9. Yeah. There's the HK, which is overclockable, and the HQ. Okay.
And then all 3 of them have all of the GPUs listed, which seems odd. I feel like the G7 shouldn't have a 1050 listed.
Yeah, but then again, if somebody... No, I agree. That's kind of weird. That is kind of weird. But again, if they're similar parts, though... Yeah, it'd be really easy for Dell to configure that. So if some weird mumbo jumbo wanted that, they could do it. Right?
Yeah. So and especially with how low cost the difference is between what would presumably be the base model Because like the base model G7 is going to be obviously the i5, the 1050, 8 gigs of RAM or 4 gigs of RAM apparently.
Yeah,
I think. I don't.
I read 8 as well.
Yeah.
But if you can configure with 4, that's pretty terrible. Yeah. Don't do it.
A 1 terabyte hard drive, the 1080p screen, whereas like the $1,100 one is an i7, a 1060, 8 gigs of RAM.
6 cores, and that's still impressive.
Yeah. 6 gigs of RAM, a 256 gig SSD, and then the 1080p
pretty
screen.
Solid. You know, speaking of Intel 6
no
cores...
17-inch listed for anything other than the G3, though, on this as well.
That's interesting. Okay, so that's weird. Maybe that was misrepresentation in the article.
There's been a lot of weird communication with
right,
this, so.
Which, I mean, it's a pretty complicated lineup in a lot of ways, so I can understand that. Yeah. You know, with Intel 6 cores, the funny thing, too, is keeping the TDP the same. It's like something had to sacrifice, because Intel didn't magically just make things more efficient. So it's like you're still getting, you know, you get better multi-threaded performance, but the single-threaded performance, which, as we'd expect, is very similar to the older machines. And even like the 2 and 4 core performance is more similar to what you'd see on the other machines. Obviously, that makes sense because it's the same amount of cores. But what I'm getting at is when you're using all 6 cores, then that single core or dual core performance is starting to drop. And so if clock speeds matter a lot for a given application that can also use all 6 cores, you might not see a huge performance jump. But, I mean, we have seen pretty decent performance jumps from what I've seen in the benchmarks that have come out of these new 6-core CPUs. So, I mean, it's cool to see them. I'm surprised that the G3 has the offering for the 8750H, though. That actually does surprise me a little bit on the lower-end model. Now, again, don't go with the 4K models. Windows scaling is so horrible. My XPS 15 here, I could have gone with the 4K model with the touchscreen. I prefer matte. That's one of the reasons I went with the 1080p. But also, you get better battery life. You get no scaling issues. You don't have to adjust your resolution in game. Yeah. And then if you prefer matte, you get that. And I don't think a touchscreen's a huge deal on laptops.
The 4K is not a touchscreen.
Oh, it's not? Okay.
No.
Okay.
So that would be the only reason to get it, and it's not.
Okay, yeah, because that's like the only reason on the XPS is like if I was recommending it to somebody, it's like only get the 4K if you really, really feel like you need touch, not if you want to try it out. If you have a touch machine and you use it all day. Yeah. Other than that, the 1080p just makes sense.
For example, the Razer Blade 14. I feel like that's when you should get the higher resolution panel because they're both IGZO panels.
Yeah,
the thing that you're getting is the resolution and the touch.
Yes, and the touch can be a big deal for some. Yeah. I don't like touch on laptops. I've never been a fan, but I know you like it.
Yeah, right? I mostly love it for just scrolling.
And it is useful for that.
That's all.
So it just depends. Now, I mean, of course, the XPS, I'm going to spoil a little, you know, I have the glass trackpad. Yeah. That helps a lot. I'd care about a touchscreen more on a more plastic or rubber-based trackpad because using this is somewhat similar to using a MacBook trackpad. It's also nice not as good because it's not this big, but... Right, and so I get that. I mean... But trackpads have gotten pretty solid, even on Windows higher-end machines. But we'll have to see how the trackpads are in the G series, because maybe they're not that great.
Yeah, and if they are all using the same, not just chassis, but like the same external frame. Yeah. Then that's, I think, where the biggest flaw is going to be, because of, let me go back to it really quick. But The Verge got, and now this was pre-production, so I want to specify that. But the person, who was it? Paul Miller, which he knows what he's talking about, so I trust this one. He had hands-on time with the pre-production G315. Okay. And he said its display had enough flex to make a 2009 netbook proud.
Woo! Oh, man.
The touchpad was barely usable, and the keyboard had a terrible tacky feel.
Which is understandable. You're paying for performance, not for build quality. Yes. That's understandable.
If you know that going in, that's fine.
Now, I do find, though, a crappy touchpad sucks. Like, if it weren't for the glass touchpad on the XPS, like I said, I would be much more inclined, even with the battery life, the performance, the scaling, and the sunshine sacrifices that you get by going with the 4K glossy panel just for the touchscreen. Yeah. Right, but the glass trackpad helps a lot. So we'll have to see.
Meanwhile, I will be packing my MX Master everywhere when I have a better laptop, so I don't care.
I oftentimes bring my mouse everywhere too. I have 2 mice.
I could get rid of the trackpad for all I care.
Right, like I bring mine everywhere, but I do actually use my machine in my lap quite a bit, and that's where the trackpad's really kind of important, right? Or if my mouse dies, although I have the charging cable with me. But anyway, so there is going to be a backlit option on all of them. Backlit keyboard, sorry, not backlit display optional, right? No, backlit keyboard is optional on all of them. Thunderbolt 3, they all have Thunderbolt 3. My question is, how many lanes are assigned to that? Is it PCI Express 2 lanes, or is it PCI Express 4 lanes, because if it's only 2 lanes, that still kind of sucks, but that's an okay sacrifice. It's the XPS that made me mad that they sacrificed and went with 2 lanes. I don't mind them doing that on the cheaper series. This is exciting, I think, for anybody that's looking for a good mobile gaming machine, or even just a mobile work machine that doesn't have a ton of cash. But in terms of mobile gaming, if you're not looking like you have your desktop or something and this isn't your primary machine, I'd say totally go for it. Now, build quality being lower, it's probably not something that I'd personally recommend as being like your all-in-all machine. This is my only gaming machine, because you're going to use it more, you're going to wear it out quicker. That's something I'd recommend, something more like an XPS, or if you're going to be doing that a lot, in particular gaming, like an Alienware or something from Sega. For those are going to be built to handle that kind of usage very consistently. It's like my XPS here, like this thing, you know, it's like it feels unbreakable. Like the keys are really, really well built. My nails hit them because I have stupid shaped nails and the way I type's weird, and so I'm hitting them with my nails, and it never leaves scratches on the keys or anything like that. They're very solidly built, and so I wouldn't expect the same build quality out of something like this. But if it's like your secondary machine, like he's planning to use, I think that's great.
Also, if you look at a lot of the pictures on
Does it have Ethernet? Did you see that?
Yes.
Okay, sweet.
A lot of the pictures on their listing do kind of look a little bit higher quality than the like pictures shown of the laptops at the event. Like if you look at the, like obviously the color
that was a pre-production, like you said, though, so but like, it might have improved.
The plastic, I mean, this is also the G3. The plastic does look cheaper than the plastic on these. Now these might be just renders, so that's also hard to tell.
And it also, is that the G3 or the G7?
This is the G7.
This is the so maybe the G3 is a cheaper.
Yeah, it might be the same internal frame, and but a better plastic on the outside.
Yeah, right, yeah, okay, yeah, exactly. So it's.
I will say, as far as Thunderbolt goes, it does say Thunderbolt speeds up to 40 gigabits per second, and I'm not seeing any asterisk anywhere on the page. For
okay, good, because I was gonna say the XPS did that. Is like 40 gigabits per second. Well, actually 20, but we're gonna say 40 because that's the Thunderbolt standard. So hopefully it's 4 full lanes. Not that that's as big of a deal. I wouldn't have even complained about it in this situation. It would have just been something to bring up.
It also has quick charging.
That's weird.
25% in 15 minutes.
That's weird. I've actually never measured the charging speed of this, but that's because I set this up as a desktop at my second job.
Advertised with quick charging. That's not like a Chromebook.
That's kind of weird.
So
I wonder if maybe the XPS uses that too.
Oh, and on the G5 and G7s have killer gigabit networking.
Okay. So, well, I'll be honest. I've had terrible luck with Killer, so good luck to those people. I've had Killer fail me repeatedly over and over and over and over. I prefer Intel's NICs in that case. I just had too many issues with Killer's software and Killer's drivers having issues. Not the NICs themselves. The NICs themselves are actually probably better than Intel's in terms of raw performance. Now, like, you know, my desktop, for example, I have the ASRock XP99 professional gaming board, and that has 2 Intel Gigabit NICs and a Quantia, I believe is the brand name, or something very similar to that, 10 gigabit NIC in there.
Yeah.
And I'm glad it doesn't have Killer, because I've had desktop parts even have problems with Killer NICs in terms of driver. Hopefully there's not a lot of problems here, but I really can say I appreciate Dell including an Ethernet port on a gaming machine.
Yeah.
That is ideal to me. If they didn't include that, that would be a bigger, you know, if the Thunderbolt 3 is only 2 lanes.
Yeah, it's one of the collapsible
I love
Ethernet
that.
because it's
that's great. That's great.
It is only 25 millimeters thick.
That is a requirement in my mind for a proper gaming machine, right?
Yeah.
Whereas my XPS doesn't have that. I carry an adapter because I so happen to have to use internet at one of my 2 jobs, where I set it up more like a desktop, and so I'm actually interested in the charging speed of this though. I should run some tests on that before I do any kind of review of it, because I set this up as a desktop, like when I get to my second job, and I just plug it in there, so it's charged up for the rest of the next day, right? But the charging speed seems to be pretty insane. Like, I think I went from something that was like 60% to 90% in like an hour and a half-ish while gaming.
Oh, wow.
So it's pretty impressive in terms of the charging speed.
Also, while not really mentioned in any of the articles about this, at least the G7 will be available in white and black, not just black.
Okay, sweet.
And a lot of the configurations for these...
Hopefully it is using better plastic then, so it doesn't get greasy as easy.
A lot of the configurations for these machines are not available yet. Most of them are not releasing until the 16th.
Okay, makes sense.
Whereas there's a couple G7 configurations that are available now.
Okay.
The difference being RAM and storage.
Okay. So. Interesting. Well, if you're in the market for a fairly high performance and fairly budget oriented gaming machine, gaming laptop, a good secondary machine that you also want to be able to game on, it's pretty solid. Something like an XPS would be recommended for something that you're going to be doing work on mostly, and then you're going to game on the side, which is exactly why I own this. But if you're going to be gaming mostly and you don't want to spend a lot, go with this, or you could go with Alienware if you want to spend a lot. But I think this kind of fills that gap that Dell had. Other than the Inspiron gaming series, it was like there was not a good middle ground. It was either really high end or work focused with gaming performance, like this machine here. But like a 1050 is fine. Fortnite, Overwatch, it's all totally playable. But the other thing is like the panel on this has some noticeable ghosting. It's not horrible, but I've seen some people and images of ghosting on the XPS so bad it's actually unplayable.
I just realized what time it was. We gotta hurry up.
Yeah, I know. We're gonna be going over a little bit, guys. We're halfway through our documentation, but the next 2 pages will go by super fast.
Alienware, all these same specs with crappy TN panels.
Yeah, but TN better response time, but still it just kind of
and no backlight bead.
And then no backlight bead. There's also 4K 60 Hz options, and interestingly enough, so you can get the 1060, 1070, or 1080, and both the 1060 and 1070 are overclocked because the chassis can handle that, so they overclock them from the factory. But what's interesting to me, and I wonder if that's hand overclocked or if that's just GPU boost. I'd be interested to look into that.
Yeah.
You can also get the RX 570. On these, which is interesting to me. Now that's like 1060-ish, some like 1060 and a half level performance, not the 580. Now which is kind of weird actually because the Polaris is pretty efficient, so it kind of surprises me there. But thank you Dell for including some kind of AMD option because that does help balance the market in some ways, right? And if you're doing work on this that requires compute, it actually would kind of make sense to go with the RX 570. Or
if you're crazy and want to mine on your laptop.
I mean,
this isn't.
I did do that for a little while,
this isn't
but
the
it didn't.
Of Bitcoin.
I didn't do that long enough to cause. I did that for 2 days, right? Before we weren't allowed to own cryptocurrency on this channel, right? But I don't recommend it. I don't recommend my GPU. I did it for a day. It was running at ADC, and I'm just not gonna do that on a laptop. It's just not a good idea. Yeah. Anyway, 180 watt power adapter for the 15-inch and 180 watt or 240 watt power adapter for the 15-inch depending on your GPU selection, and up to a 330 watt option for the 17-inch. Bigger screen, other stuff like that. It's not different GPU configurations, but just there's a little bit more power consumption there, and so they go with standards. So the next step up from the 240 was the 330. Even though they might be able to get away with a 270 or something, right? And so, you can get a 68 or 99 watt hour battery. Now, that's literally the biggest you can legally take on a plane in terms of the 99 watt hour. So, that's cool. All right. So, there's also the Gigabyte Aero 15 got updated with the 6-core chips, in particular the i7-7850H.
87. Not 77. Or not 78.
Whoa. 8750H. Wow. Oh, my. I put those numbers. I typed that backwards.
Gen?
You're like,
what?
Wait a minute. All right. 144 hertz panel, which is cool, and a GTX 1070 Max Q. Aorus laptops got updated. Gigabyte, please stop using so similar names. Gigabyte Aorus, Gigabyte Aero. Now, I can understand Aorus is supposed to be another brand, technically, so it's just Aorus, not Gigabyte Aorus. But everybody knows it's Gigabyte, for the most part, so this is kind of But anyway, those got updated. So, the Gigabyte Aorus laptops, there's the X5 V8. I'm assuming version 8, 15.6 inch, gets the i7-8850H with a 1070 1080p display at 144 hertz with G-Sync and IPS calibrated by hand.
Dope.
So that is a nice display. That right there is enough alone to pay the extra for the Aorus laptop, in my opinion, if you're really going to be using the machine a lot for gaming. Up to 32 gigabytes of RAM and 2 M.2 drives, as well as a 2.5-inch drive. Pretty solid specs there.
Oh, that's what they start at.
What? Price-wise? What were you thinking?
I wasn't thinking. I was
the
just
X7 V8, or sorry, the X5 V8 starts at $2,600. Yeah, they're not cheap, but that's why they're hand-calibrated displays and stuff, right? Aorus, they make amazing stuff, I'll be honest. Gigabyte's premium brand. They do a good job, so I can understand not trying to associate the Gigabyte name with it, but we all know it's them. Now, anyway, so there's the X7 DT V8, which is a 17.3-inch... This nomenclature all over the place makes me mad, but it's a 17.3-inch, also with the 8550H CPU, up to a GTX 1080. Now, when I say up to, it's actually probably just a 1080. Aorus tends to not allow any configuration between their models. 1080p display, 144Hz G-Sync, IPS calibrated by hand, up to 64 gigabytes of RAM, which is pretty solid. solid, and then the same drive configuration. There's also the X9 DT, which is another 17.3 inch. This uses the i9 9850HK, so it's an overclockable CPU, pretty solid. Also a 1080 with a 1080p display, 144Hz G-Sync, IPS, calibrated by hand. 64 gigabytes of RAM again, and then the same drive configuration as all of the others. MSI also updated their laptop. There's the GS65, which is their thin and light machine, thin and light gaming machine. They updated it to 144Hz IPS display. Thank you for using IPS, greatly appreciated. It's got a really thin bezel. It's actually pretty impressive. GTX 1060 or 1070 option, and there's also 6-core CPU options available on it, up to 32 gigabytes of RAM. It's pretty impressive for a thin and light laptop, to be completely honest. I really like it. Now, that's their thin and light. There's also the GT75 Titan, which is their higher-end, full-size gaming laptop brand. It's got the i9-8950HK, really solid there. So, overclocking available. Up to a GTX 1080. You can also do SLI 1070s or a single 1070. Mm-hmm. Now, don't go SLI, generally speaking, but SLI 1070s will outperform a 1080. So, if you play a lot of games that are specifically SLI compatible, I can understand why somebody would want to go that route, but I do find it funny that MSI even put the R&D into making that available.
Yeah.
Because that means they have to have 2 separate sets of heat pipes and everything.
It is the
right?
Titan.
It is the Titan, but still, it's kind of like, that's a lot of R&D, and it's like, just go with the 1080.
But it's the Titan.
They
just want to show off.
Yeah, of course, this is coming from the person that says that I wanted 2-slot GPUs from Vega so that I could put 2 of them in a system. Not actually probably going to do that, but people do buy these things, I guess, right? This guy, I mean, right? I know, this guy.
This kid.
This boy.
Yeah.
All right, then there's also the GE Raider RGB edition. Now, you'd think, oh, RGB, well, why are they even putting that in the name? That's dumb. Like, a lot of laptops have RGB lights on them and stuff. No, this is actually really cool. Oh, you should open up the link or something, dude. This is actually really pretty. The GE Raider RGB. I don't have screen cap set up right now, unfortunately, but you should totally look it up. Beautiful lighting on the back panel and everything. Lots of configurable LEDs. It's actually really impressive. Scroll down a little further. See? It's actually really pretty cool. And there's like some RGBs in the heat sinks and stuff. Yeah, above the heat sink. So it's really, really, really pretty machine. I actually do like the RGB implementation on this. Now, you can get a GTX 1060 or 1070, up to 32 gigabytes of RAM, and a 4K or a 1080p 120 hertz panel. So the 4K panel is not 120 hertz. That's just standard 60 hertz display. And then there's also the GS73, the GS63 Stealth, the GT83, the GT83 Titan. Were all updated with Intel's 8th gen CPUs. Doesn't seem to be any changes other than that, though, related to those.
I just thought of a good idea for one of these companies to do.
What's up?
Have really cool backlighting like this around the edge, and then have software that allows it to tell what's on the screen.
And then you put it by a wall. I like it. Why isn't somebody capitalizing on that?
And MSI, get on it. There you go, free money.
Sucks being a tech YouTuber sometimes because you think of these things and then you say company do it, but then we realize we're not a big enough channel to really make MSI do anything, but it's a great idea. Or, when you're, our news site and you're the first person to report about the Gigabyte gaming box being AMD, potentially Gigabyte branded because it's AMD exclusive and GPP affecting that because it's not the AOS gaming box, right? And it's like, I posted about that and almost a week later, the big publications picked that up. And I'm like, great, my article got 25 views or whatever. And now the big publications are all talking about it. It's like, I was a week ahead of the game, but whatever. Anyway, so yeah, Asus laptops. There's the Asus Zephyrus MGM501. Oh my goodness, the name. 15.6 inches. It's less than 1 inch thick, and from my understanding, it was just updated with 6-core. Not a massive deal or anything like that. Now, this is one that actually I think you'll be interested in talking about. So the Ethereum miners, the ASIC miners for Ethereum,
it's so dumb to be getting into that business.
To be getting into the ASIC business or Ethereum?
For Ethereum, ASIC. Because Ethereum is trying to move away from mining.
Oh, yeah, I know. But there's still area to capitalize in it. And so Bitmain has the money to do it. Bitmain has shipped a lot of ASIC miners before. They're a fairly reliable company, I think, in terms of that. Some people get worried about ASIC miners because they're like, sometimes they never ship and stuff like that. So Bitmain announced the Antminer E3, which is going to be mining Ethereum in specific, and it's going to be better at it than your gaming graphics cards. So this might help with the gaming GPU shortage. But of course, there are other, there are other reasons other algorithms and stuff that benefit from GPUs quite a bit, but this might really help a lot. I've talked to a friend of mine who's really into cryptocurrency mining, and he mentioned to me that he thinks this is probably the start of the kind of the death of the GPU shortage in terms of for mining, at least.
For a year.
Well, yeah, right. Well, because though this algorithm's the primary algorithm that takes advantage of gaming GPU performance, which is Dagger Hashimoto. So yeah, anyway, this is an ASIC miner, application specific integrated circuit for mining Ethereum or anything else that uses the Dagger Hashimoto. I can't think of the proper term, but you know what I mean. So that includes Ethereum Classic, Ubiq, Preer, I think is how it's pronounced, and a few more that can be mined with that. I apologize for maybe pronouncing some of those wrong. We don't mind. We don't participate in cryptocurrency because we have a policy around here about that, because we don't want to have any influence on the market in terms of that, right? So
yeah.
Anyway, just to give you guys a heads up, we're not super skilled in this area. So 180 mega hashes per second, from what I understand, or 180 mega hashes per second, yeah. For the ET hash, anyway, 800 watt power usage, so that is more, that is better performance than the gaming GPU, for example. Vega 64 doesn't stand a chance at 40 mega hashes a second, being also really expensive right now, and even at MSRP, it would still take double the price pretty much to equal this performance in theory. Now it's an $800 product, so you know, pretty expensive but understandable for this kind of performance, and so it hopefully will bring the GPU shortage, like dial it back, so that we can actually buy our GPUs, which would be really, really, really great. Anyway, so all right, now let's jump into the next little section here. Now this is one, so OnePlus 6 official teaser, right?
I mean, we have more than a teaser now.
Yes.
So I'll just confirm the specs that we have confirmed. There is a notch. However, people got mad about the notch, so OnePlus's response is software to get rid of the notch.
And I'm actually okay with that.
I think that's the way to go. If you, for companies, is if you want to go for that bezel-less design, just make the notch, make a software toggle for a complete black bar there, no icons,
and make it a really easy toggle.
Yes.
Yes, please make it. Don't make it something that's buried in developer settings or something.
Display. That's it.
Yes, exactly.
But
and maybe even like a tutorial pop-up about it, because a lot of phones do that when you first turn them on. You know, they've got the little, like, here's your home screen. Don't like the notch, click here and we'll turn off the notch, right?
Or just during setup.
Yeah, or something
like
that.
Do you want the notch? Yes or no, with a little preview.
And like a little thing that shows it up above. Like, do you want this or do you want it to look like this instead?
Yeah. But yeah, so you can disable the notch, and it just literally just shuts off that portion of the display, so it's all black.
Is it OLED? This is an OLED display?
Yeah.
Okay.
It does look very close. So I saw a picture of it. It looks good.
Yeah, I mean, it's OLED. It makes sense. It just turns off. So other than the physical depth difference, technically speaking, that your eyes could tell a little bit, other than that, it's going to look very similar.
Yeah. Other than that, so you have 8 gigs of RAM.
Another phone with 8 gigs of RAM. Thank you for eating up all the RAM. I should say
up to.
Thank you for eating up all the RAM phone market, because you guys need 8 gigabytes for whatever reason.
And up to 256 gigs of storage.
Now, I'm okay with that. Even though it's a little ridiculous, it's the 8 gigs of RAM that really kind of bothers me. On the Razer phone, I kind of understood. But still, it's not necessary. I have 4 gigs on my S8 Plus, right? And now, obviously, Samsung's horrible at RAM management. And I pretty much never feel like I need more RAM. And that's coming from a guy that has his desktop idle at 16 gigabytes of RAM.
The thing is that the way that Android RAM works,
the more you have, it'll use it all.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it just means that more applications will stay open, so they're easier to get back into.
It does appear faster.
It ultimately comes down to being the same reason you want to keep all of your tabs
my Chrome
in
tabs,
RAM.
right? Because I have like 50
because everything
plus
is
tabs
slightly
open.
faster.
Yeah. Okay.
It's ultimately that same effect.
Okay, I can agree with. I can get on that. Okay.
It is, with the exception of NVMe storage, probably the most significant performance increase on a day-to-day usage that you can do, in my opinion. a slight processor speed bump isn't really going to affect many applications.
Right.
Whereas being able to keep everything in RAM, being able to switch between an app you haven't used in 3 hours and it's still there, ready to go,
is nice. Now, we'll use more battery life, which is something to keep in mind. But, yeah, okay, I can understand that. And also, of course, Samsung has really aggressive RAM management, which is something I hate. It's like, oh, yeah, we'll only use 2 gigabytes at a time. Excuse me? But, anyway, yeah, so now something was interesting. They talked about the speed you need was one of the things in the ad about this, right? Now, that kind of led some people to assume that it's got really solid cooling, just like the Razer phone, so it'll outperform other Snapdragon 845 models in specific, because obviously it's going to be using the 845.
It's already confirmed.
That's confirmed. Okay. But yeah, so it'll probably be the fastest 845 phone out there until maybe Razer releases one, but we'll have to see what happens. I like the idea behind that, though. This is maybe something I can get on board.
This is what the P20 looks like with the notch disabled.
Yeah, it's like you really can't even tell.
Like, that's with it on, that's with it off. Well, except they have icons on
theirs, but you can also...
Really off.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so some miscellaneous news for you guys. That was our only little thing in the mobile segment right now. But production numbers for Tesla. Now, did you read into this at all? Or I know I wrote this piece here.
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Q1 results actually don't look as bad as I think people were expecting.
But also they weren't at the goals.
They're not at the goals. But they're also not completely horrible like some people expected. So Tesla produced about half the amount of Model 3s they wanted to make in Q1, right? That's correct from my understanding, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because the goal was 2,000 a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. And so they produced 9,766 Model 3s, which really isn't that bad, in my opinion, considering all the production issues they've been running into.
Yeah, they got really slow startup, but they're getting there.
They're getting there. They are ramping up. So investors stop freaking out.
Well, their stock went down because of that, but it was also going down because of things like the Model X crash that is being investigated, things like that.
Right. And I can understand that, but I think if I were an investor, I want to hold my money in that company for a while. It's not a quick cash company, in my opinion.
Yeah, but you probably know more about
That's
Tesla
true,
than
right. Whereas they're like, they're in bad news, pull out, right, because they don't pay attention.
Yeah, well, I mean... Any company that's putting a significant amount of their future on self-driving, like Tesla is, the Model 3 was designed around self-driving.
Yes, very much so.
That is apparent by the lack of a dash.
Mm-hmm.
So any company that is putting so much focus on that, when self-driving is taking so many hits in the press...
Yeah,
it is understandable that investors,
because remember, every time a self-driving car hits and kills somebody, there's only like a couple thousand other cars that hit and kill people.
Yeah, but it's the public perception from the people that don't understand the situation.
Right.
I think that,
and it's hard to justify how many lives were saved by self-driving cars, for example.
Education is going to have to be one of the biggest things that all companies working on self-driving are going to have to come together.
They need to focus on that and be like, hey, how do we explain this to people so they're not scared of it, so that they understand that this does a better job than a human, and it's gonna you're safer using these vehicles, and they're not more dangerous on the road. Now, there are still a lot of people that'll be skeptical. There's still a lot of people that just don't want them because they enjoy driving. And I think the unfortunate truth there is eventually we're gonna get in a situation where there's so many self-driving cars obeying the laws appropriately and stuff on the road. Having your own car to drive won't be fun anymore unless you're on back roads, right? So
it's also gonna get to the point where it's just those are the ones causing the accidents.
Yes, and then insurance prices go up. And so then in order to own your own car that you drive, insurance prices will go up. Now, I think that's a long-term future, because a lot of people are, people, like, my vehicle is semi-new-ish. It's 2000, so it's like, it's 18 years old. But it's like, people keep their vehicles for a long time, a lot longer than a lot of other things for the most part. And so I think we'll see, like, even if self-driving is the majority of the new cars, we'll see older cars around for quite some time.
Except that doesn't take into account the promise of self-driving in that, for example, with Tesla. One of the ways that people will be able to afford the Model 3 that can't afford a $35,000 car is having their car go out and be self-driving
or just not even owning it at some point,
yes.
and just being a fleet service that comes
exactly
to you.
gets to my point. Eventually, you have so many cars doing that it brings the cost down.
Right. Yeah.
And we've already seen other things like Waymo buying 20,000 Jaguars.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're gonna eventually.
It's pronounced Jaguar. Okay.
It's pronounced Porsche. We're gonna see so many self-driving cars on the road from those services that at that point people are gonna be like, well, it's now cheaper than paying for insurance.
It's pronounced Porsche, Daniel.
I'm just gonna go get in this self-driving Porsche, and
you make me so angry.
That really irritates him. So just for anyone that would ever need to know that,
it irritates me not only because I love Porsche, but also because I did own one at one point. So it really makes me angry. I didn't own the Porsche for like a month. I had that quite some time, and then it got in a wreck.
Oh yeah,
and it was sad. That was not the 350Z that I had for a month.
It was the Z that you never really owned. It was the Z
that I never really owned. The Porsche was all mine.
That you wrecked.
I did not wreck it. It got wrecked by a family member, and it wasn't their fault at all. So.
Well, if you had a self-driving car, that accident might
yeah,
not have
right.
happened.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, and I think what we'll see, though, I think we'll still see car enthusiasts driving themselves. So eventually. If you see people driving themselves, right, in a long-term future, it's like, oh, that person is a car enthusiast. They like driving, and they're probably going to go drive on some freaking back roads and haul ass, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Few other results from this, though, unless you had something else you wanted to mention about it?
No, I was trying to power through it.
Okay, few other results. 34,494 total vehicles in quarter one, 24,728 of those being Model S and Model X. Stock has been going up a little bit since these numbers were announced because it wasn't quite as bad, I think, as some investors thought it was. And so, yeah, that's pretty impressive, to be honest. And they are also saying that they're promising 2,500 per week by the end of Q1, meaning they're pretty close to meeting that, actually, because now they're getting close to that. You know, it was the beginning of Q1, there was less going on. Now the scaling is a lot better.
Musk, I know that Musk was going to go back to sleeping at the factory to personally oversee it.
Yeah,
there was even one time where he did like a camping trip on top of the factory.
That's pretty hilarious. Yeah. That's pretty awesome. Man.
Spotify went public. It did slightly better than expected. Other than that, they're just now a public company.
All right.
Facebook and Apple are kind of getting into a fight, which I kind of find hilarious.
I do find it hilarious, and I'm on Apple's side.
So this all started with...
which is weird for me to say,
Apple,
but I hate Facebook
who is
so
very
much.
privacy concerned compared to most companies.
Well, it's one of the main reasons that people think that their assistant, Siri, isn't as good, is because they don't have as much data on people, right? And
I mean, yes and no. A lot of the problems with Siri rely on just it not doing a good job at basic search.
Yeah,
not doing a good job at basic IoT stuff. Not doing a good job at what people want.
Anything an assistant should do a good job at.
It's like it's one of those things where they should start from the ground up, but it's extremely difficult to do so.
Yeah, and it's funny, like, being in... Yeah, and it's great being in, like, a room with somebody when they're going to ask their assistant a question, and somebody pulls out the iPhone and they ask Siri, right? And while they're, like, when they're done asking, I then pull out my phone and tap Google Assistant and ask it, and I get the answer first, and I get the right one, not, sorry, I didn't understand that, you know.
Or I just squeeze my phone.
Or you can just squeeze your phone, that's true. Does it still work with the grip on it?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, what's going on here, though? Yeah.
This all started with Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, calling out Facebook over the privacy issues, stating that they, Apple doesn't have to worry about these privacy issues because they sell products to the customer. They don't sell the customer as the product.
Yeah, right.
And that Facebook needs to be regulated because they haven't done it themselves. Facebook was in such a position of power that they should have been self-regulating. They should have been dealing with this sooner, not letting it become a problem until it became a PR problem.
Right.
And that's where Apple's stance is like...
And I agree with them.
They've proven that we can't rely on them. And when you have the power of ultimately, Facebook has the power of a country. When they fail on the level of a country. They just have no enforcement capability.
Yeah, exactly.
And... Facebook CEO, I was listening to a podcast with Facebook CEO on it. He doesn't talk very much, so I was very interested in it, especially since it's from a podcast I already listened to.
Who's Facebook CEO?
Mark Zuckerberg.
Ah. Just in case you guys didn't make that connection.
Yeah. So he started talking about how he was quoting someone. I don't remember who he was quoting, but he was essentially stating some companies try and sell you products for more money. Some companies try and sell you their product for less. Facebook is a company that wants to be able to get everyone in, and the only way to do that is to make it free. The only way to do that is ads.
Well, you see, Facebook, their goal is to connect everybody. Mm-hmm. No matter how the hell they do it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, we'll break laws, we'll break privacy, we'll hurt people, we'll sell your data, we don't care. As long as we connect everybody. Yeah, exactly. It's just like, okay.
But with that being said, so Facebook CEO essentially equated Apple getting people to pay more for products to Stockholm Syndrome. And he used Stockholm Syndrome specifically. Like, those were his exact words.
Yeah.
I laughed when I heard that. I'm just like, wow,
it's kind of
that's going pretty far.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, boy.
Yeah. And then speaking of Facebook, they're in some more trouble because turns out, so we had previously mentioned the reports about 50 million people's data being gathered.
Which is a lot and a problem.
That was wrong. Facebook came out and corrected everyone. It's actually 87 million.
Or maybe it'll be more. Maybe it's going to be the Equifax. You know, it's just going to go up and up and up and up.
I'm sure it will.
It's like, oh, sorry, it's 1 billion now, guys.
Yeah. At this point, I don't think anyone on Facebook should consider that Facebook has control over their data.
Now, do you think Facebook's going to go under because of this at some point? You don't think so at all?
Facebook, at least they are claiming that they have not seen a significant decrease in users. Now, that being said, it takes 2 weeks to delete your account. So them saying that now and them saying that in a month is going to be a very different story.
Yes, indeed. And I still have one for the business, but it's like I don't use it personally that much. Once in a while I'll post
Mine is in the process of deletion.
Right, and it's just frustrating that it takes that long. You know what I mean?
Well, it's because they completely wipe your data, and they want you to be sure that you have it or have a chance to get back in. Because it's like, what if you delete it and then you realize, oh, there was a photo on there that I...
Right. That's
which is also why they tell you to archive your stuff beforehand as well.
Yeah, right.
But, I mean, even Zuckerberg is saying that Facebook users should assume that their public information has been scraped. So, everyone who has an account with any information
So Facebook just doesn't... So the question is, Cambridge Analytica, like, the question is, who else has had access to this kind of information, right?
Anyone that
That's the question is, your information's probably gone.
Anyone that made an application for Facebook, or on Facebook...
And ask for these permissions can get all this.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, how many places didn't get caught?
Yeah.
Right? And so, yeah, at this point, though, like...
intelligence agency in the world probably was doing this.
Yes. And at this point, it's like, I've used Facebook, and I was off Facebook for over 5 years. I deactivated the account, and then I got back on it, mostly for the business, right? We upload all our videos there as well, although we prefer you watch on YouTube because we get some revenue from that. We don't from Facebook. They just make money off of our videos, but we upload there just to reach a wider audience, right? We like to upload to as many locations as possible, but my point being is I've been using it, and so at this point, it's like, okay, my data's gone, so what hurts if I keep using it? Somebody's taken my data.
For me, it's
guaranteed.
Not about that.
It's about the morality of supporting Facebook.
Well, not even that. It's that I don't want to be on a platform where they don't have control over their own platform.
That's a good.
For me,
I
used Facebook knowing they were selling my information.
Right.
But it's their choice on selling the information. That's a bit different. That's a bit different than I don't even have control over my own platform. Yeah. Mark Zuckerberg is he literally can't be ousted as CEO because he has a majority share. He is the controlling interest.
And he's also a piece of garbage.
Facebook is not about money for him. Facebook is about his life's work. And he doesn't control his life's work.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it comes down to, is that I'm not going to use a platform where...
So you're telling me he can't do anything right?
He can...
He can walk right, probably.
Huh? He can make himself seem taller than people.
That's true. Yeah, he can do that. Oh man.
But it's like I use Google. I know that they sell my information.
Yeah.
In fact, I use Google Opinion Rewards, which is literally just them giving me directly money for my information.
Yes, exactly.
But if I were to find out that Google has completely lost
and their
control
information
of
was
their
getting
platform,
stolen, which basically has never happened,
Yeah.
other than through third-party apps being hacked that had access to that information.
Yeah.
Which sounds similar to this, but no, not in the same way. In terms of like an app is authorized to access your information, so they propagate their servers with that information, and then their servers
and it's
get
not even
taken.
that, because it's like with Facebook, it's not even I gave that application,
And it wasn't
permission.
a hack; it was just here you can just do it.
But it wasn't even me giving that app permission. Like if I give an app permission and it gets taken
it
by
was
that
other
company,
people
that's
that
my
were
fault.
connected to you that gave that app permission.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Facebook is just
So in terms of like security practice, like people are talking. There's been talks in a lot of podcasts and news about, well, Google does all this too, Microsoft does a lot of this too. It's what they do with the data, not the matter of whether or not they're collecting it. Yeah, Twitter does this, Google does this, Microsoft. They all do it.
Yes.
These giant corporations, of course, they do it. The question is, what do they do with your data after they keep it all? And a lot of them do sell it, but what do they do with that data in terms of security practices?
Yeah.
Clearly, Facebook does basically nothing. Yeah.
ultimately it comes down to consumers should have the ability to choose the company. Like obviously, if they choose the company they're using, they should know how that data is being used.
Yes, I agree.
You can't if Facebook doesn't know how that data is being used, or they don't care that other companies are taking it,
then
the
they can't
consumer
inform the
really-
consumer. Yeah, exactly.
So,
Even if
Facebook
they
has
wanted
failed
to.
at the one thing that they should have been working on this whole time, which is ensuring that
Information security, in a sense.
their business is selling your data. Their whole thing should be protecting your data so that they're the only one who can sell it.
Yeah, that's a great point.
They failed at the one thing protecting their business model.
It's like you're a bank, right? And what you do is you loan out money to people, right? But all the money is just sitting on shelves inside the front door.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
They kind of failed at that.
Pretty horrible.
Next thing, Cloudflare launched
so
a
extra
new
news
DNS.
here. Yeah. So, yeah, Cloudflare, as he just said, and I interrupted him very rudely, launched a new DNS, a public DNS service, 1.1.1.1. Now, I have not seen... I like it, yeah. Now, I have not seen any information on a IPv6 address or a backup address for either of those in terms of DNS. I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that further. But 1.1.1.1 is the primary DNS. It's a public DNS server. It is really fast. It beats Google's. It beats Quad 9's, too, which is also really fast. That's 9.9.9.9, which also... They do have an IPv6 and a IPv4. They have an IPv6 and they also have an IPv4 backup. I don't know if they have an IPv6 backup, but this is actually even faster than Google's, and Google's was a few milliseconds faster than Quad 9's, although Quad 9's was very good, and Quad 9 is rolling out more servers, so I'd be interested in both where your location is, what the performance of these is like, as well as once Quad 9 rolls out more of their DNS servers, what is their performance going to top Cloudflare? We'll have to see. But we're talking not much different. In my testing, I think it was like I was getting around like 14 milliseconds average from Cloudflare, where I was getting like 18 milliseconds average from Google and like 21 milliseconds average from Quad 9. So a bigger gap between Cloudflare and the others, but those two are still very close, and it's still only milliseconds. It's not hugely noticeable, but it is somewhat noticeable. Like it's enough where it's like, oh, okay, I'm planning to change my router's DNS address to 1.1.1.1 so that my whole network here at home uses that. So it's pretty cool.
The secondary one is 1.0.0.1.
1.0.0.1.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. And then do they have any IPv6 ones listed?
Not in this article.
Okay. Maybe they don't have any yet, which is not a huge deal. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. Maybe want to use it. Now I have a couple more really quick topics just to throw through here. So we've got Panera Bread ignored a security warning. So that was pretty funny. Literally the first bullet point I put was fuckers.
Don't curse on this podcast.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. No. So
Demonetized.
yeah, I'm not. Yeah. Well, we've actually never got demonetized, but I think it's because we're not big enough yet for them to care.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Even the algorithm doesn't hate us.
Yeah. Right. Well, no. It's just I don't think we're just not getting anybody reporting it. I guess. I don't know. But they also it's just not being searched.
Yeah.
They're like, there's too much data to sift through. We're not going to worry about you 1,000 sub channels. I would think after 1,000, that's when they would start scrubbing for that. But whatever. Maybe I just need to pay better attention to whether or not we're being demonetized because I don't look very close.
Oh, it's a good thing we're not relying on money from this channel.
What do you mean by that? I mean, it's like, it's not like...
Okay, topic.
Yeah, okay. We have a topic about okay?
No.
Oh, my bad. See, it's the same situation. I didn't know my interest rate, right? Now it's like, I don't know if we're monetized or not. I'm just kidding. Okay, so 37 million customers' data was potentially available online and likely stolen, like completely just public-facing. It was very easy to get. I mean, public-facing, I use that term roughly, but it was very easy to get into. Panera Bread claims only 10,000-ish were stolen, while security researchers claim more like 37 million. They ignored warnings about this until it went public. Literally, they were warned about this by a security researcher, and they claimed that his email looked like a scam, so we ignored it. It's like, do you not even look up the guy's name? Oh, what was his name anyway? I actually forgot what it is. But it's like, if you get an email from somebody claiming you have security problems, isn't one of the first things you do before replying, like, looking up the person? So, let's see. I'm trying to find his name in specific.
Is it that tweet?
Oh, wait. No, Troy Hunt talked about it, but I don't think he was the original poster, but Troy Hunt did. Krebs also tweeted links that he said showed the breach affecting. So, let me see, because I don't know who Krebs is. Let's get his actual name. Brian Krebs. Okay, there we go. So, you look him up and you go, oh, wow, he's a security researcher that's reported on stuff before. He's not CTS Labs. Okay, so why don't we look into whatever's going on here? But they ignored it because it looked like a scam. Now, maybe whoever got the email was just like, whatever, and deleted it and didn't really know what they were doing. And at that case, you need to figure out who the heck's looking through the emails that are being sent here and get rid of that guy and find somebody that knows where to send stuff like this if he didn't know what to do with it or she didn't know what to do with it. So anyway, it was never patched until now. The guy repeatedly was checking monthly because he's like, my data's on there. And he would recheck multiple times a month and he didn't do anything about it. Anyway, I believe it's patched now, but it's just like...
So what you're saying is eating healthy is bad for your security.
Apparently, eating healthy is bad for your security. I really like that. Is that everything we...
No, I wanted to talk about one last thing with Google. Google I think it was last month, there was an announcement that they were working with the Department of Defense on Project Maven. Okay. Which was a research initiative to develop computer vision algorithms.
Oh, yeah, I saw some headlines about this. Yeah, okay.
In response to this, 3,100 plus Google employees have signed a letter urging Sundar Pichai to reevaluate, stating that Google should not be in the business of war. I agree.
You agree?
Yeah.
You do agree with this? I don't know how I feel about it yet. I'm going to need more details before I really form a strong opinion on it, but... I don't know, I'm really lopsided on it right now, because at one hand I feel like maybe they shouldn't be, but on the other hand, I mean, do we know what this AI is going to be used for by any means?
It's something about drones, that's all we know.
So...
They're obviously not going to tell us.
Yeah, but it might just be surveillance-based, and Google's one of the best in the industry on that kind of stuff.
But it's the Department of Defense.
Yeah.
It's probably going to get used for all of the military. It's not just...
Yeah, but I mean, it might be primarily like a surveillance-based AI that can detect, like, hey, looking for these kind of signatures, right? And then it's like, oh, I found something,
notify. And then
notify.
the Air Force is like, oh, now let's adopt this to shoot.
Right, and that's a good point, too. But then at that point, Google, depending on what the contract's like, maybe could be like, no. We're not going to help you develop AI that can shoot. We'll help you develop AI that can identify targets. And
if the contract states that all of the AI work ultimately belongs to the DoD,
they could just adjust it to then do shooting. So it would depend on how the AI was used to identify things, right? Yeah. If it was used to identify a frame has this in it versus here's something in this frame.
Now, the reason that I am so against this is there needs to be regulation in place now on how AI and military stuff will be used before I am okay with work like this starting.
Okay, I guess that's understandable. Yeah, so it's not so much like a problem with Google, but a problem with regulation in terms of.
Well, yeah.
Because I don't mind a private company getting into this kind of stuff.
That being said, Google has purposefully done things to stay out of military.
That's true,
stuff.
but Google.
That was the whole point of selling off.
But Google isn't all about don't be evil anymore, so.
I know, but they haven't been for a long time.
Well, yeah, but I mean.
But that was the whole point of selling off Boston Dynamics, was to not be involved in robotic
that's right.
military.
They sold them off. We talked about that too. I'd forgotten.
Like when they first bought Boston Dynamics, they had to like fight back on contracts because Boston Dynamics already had military contracts.
Yeah, and so it's like, I don't know.
So
I guess I can understand that perspective. I also don't generally mind the private industry getting into working with the military. It's highly profitable for them, and
Google's not like a part of private industry. They are the private industry.
I mean, that's a good point. But Google, I mean, they could potentially use the money from this to do interesting stuff.
Yeah, because Google needs money.
I mean, I don't know if the EU keeps finding them billions. They are going to need some money.
Maybe they shouldn't violate EU law.
You know what? That's it. I figured it out. The EU fined Google, and Google was pissed, so they're like, we're going to do stuff for the U.S. military now.
No.
So, thank you to the EU for making Google get into the AI targeting area.
One last thing.
I'm just kidding.
We do have, it was about Facebook again as well.
Oh, okay.
Last week we talked about the regulation being implemented in the EU.
Yes.
And we have confirmation that Facebook thinks that those rules will hurt its business, and their business is selling our data.
So
because it's not being implemented in the U.S.
or anywhere else. They said they will not implement it in any other countries. Yeah.
So they are going like, oh shit, we have to in the EU. So we're doing it in the EU.
And that's it.
But it's going to hurt our ability to give other people your information.
Yep.
So
okay, I think that's everything we have, though. So, thank you, everybody, for watching. That was an extended podcast there, I guess. Normally it wouldn't go that long. But
we started late.
We started late, and we also had 6 pages of documentation as opposed to our normal 2 to 3. So, kind of crazy there. But we got through a lot of stuff there, a lot of interesting stuff. A surprising amount of PC news this time, actually. That was amazing. There are more laptops and stuff, too, but there's just not enough space to talk about all of them. Now, I will be having a video. I should have a video of blips out for you guys on the channel on Friday, which will be talking about buckling spring keyboard switches, the history behind them, as well as how they work. I hate you. Anyway, I'll have a video. I should have a blips video out on that for you guys. It'll give you an explanation in detail of where those springs came from and why a lot of people still do prefer them for keyboards. And then Monday, there'll be another video up. Hopefully will be a review of my Nth Evolve ATX, but I'm not sure yet because I'm having a birthday LAN party this weekend. It's going to be pretty exciting because both our birthdays are coming up, so filming is going to be somewhat limited on those days, right? But anyway, thank you everybody for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, as well as leave your comments down below about what you think of this, especially if you're watching afterwards. Please leave your comments down below, and we're totally interested in hearing your thoughts. Also, don't forget to check out all the links in the video description. There's a link down there to our Patreon page in case you're interested in giving us a monthly contribution to support the channel, which we greatly appreciate. There are a few of you that are doing that, and it means the world to us, so thank you very much. There's also a link down there that goes to our website that allows you to subscribe to a notification that you'll get via email before the podcast starts, a couple of hours before it starts, so that you know that, oh yeah, that's happening on this day, so that you get a little bit of a reminder there. Definitely something I would recommend signing up for if you can. And obviously the other links down there go to our social media as well as our website, which we attempt to keep updated with consistent tech news, although that's been a little lacking over the last week. But the plan is to start working on that very hard again, like tomorrow. So anyway, thank you everybody for watching. This is Ethan, and what's your name again?
Harry Potter.
Oh yeah, Harry Potter. This is Harry Potter. So anyway, thank you guys, and we'll see you all in the next one. So now I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna click stop streaming. Let's see.
Is that how that works?
I think so.